I would like to ask everyone to find their seats, please. What a great looking audience. Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Chris Emmerich. I am not Graham Worthy. Graham has unexpectedly come down with some illness and he's unable to be here with us today. But the show must go on. So I am a reluctant MC who has had just a few moments to prepare for today's events. But I would like to welcome everyone here to our Coastal Vision 2022 event with the goal today to essentially look at where we are currently and to pinpoint where we need to go, what we need to do, and how we need to get there to solve the many complex coastal challenges. I'd like everyone to really think about being an active participant today. We want to have an open discussion with you. We don't want to stand up here and lecture you. But now I'm going to put on my emergency manager's hat. I am a hazard geographer, so everyone's bad day is my good day. So a little housekeeping. We have refreshments over here to the back, my right of the room. Please, at any point in time, grab some refreshments. We have emergency exits all in the back of the room, as you can see by the red signs. These exits can either go to the left or to the right if you need to. And now I feel like a flight attendant. So emergency exits to the left and to the right. Restrooms are right behind us in the back. If you have to take a call, feel free to step out. We know that you all have important business to take care of. As I indicated, Graham is not going to be here, but he has recorded a message, which we'll listen to in a minute. I would like, before we do that, to recognize the Honorable Senator Linda Stewart from District 13. Senator Stewart. And now I want to ask our wonderful communications folks to play a short message from Graham.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is not exactly the way I had envisioned me opening this symposium, but it's the best I can do. Coastal Vision 2022, challenges and opportunities. The challenges have been simply having this meeting. This was originally supposed to have been Coastal Vision 2020, and then a certain pandemic swept the world and everything changed. Then it was going to be Coastal Vision 2021, Spring Edition, and 2021 Fall Edition. When we couldn't have that, we decided that outreach and communication of our science is still something we desperately need to do. And so we had what was a very successful Lunch on the Coast seminar series, where we focused on 6 of our faculty. We thought that this spring, things were better. And we settled on this date and everything moved forward and everything looked like it was going well. And then COVID reared its ugly head this past week and caught me. And so I'm glad you could all be in attendance. And I'm unfortunately very sad that I can't be. The whole idea between Coastal Vision is face-to-face communication. That is something that I feel is incredibly important and that has been very, very successful in the past. So today's meeting is going to be a little different from what you maybe have been used to in the past. It's going to be very participatory. The panelists have been selected to represent different disciplines and fields of endeavor, and many of them actually represent partners of UCF Coastal. And so we will have panelists who will introduce themselves, give a little bit of their background, and then it's going to become more of a conversation with everybody in the audience. So I highly encourage you to get involved. I want you to be asking questions, sharing opinions, sharing experiences. This idea of partnership and communication and collaboration are some of the essential foundational pieces of UCF Coastal. No single institution can do this on their own. and we recognize that. We have a great diversity of discipline and expertise on this campus, but we still can't be everything. And so we have partnered with many organizations, like I said, some of whom are represented here today on the panels. And with those partners, I think collectively we can really move the needle. We can make a difference. The remaining piece is you. That is a crucial piece of this whole puzzle, is the integration and investment from everybody, even if they're not official partners with UCF Coastal. And so I hope this afternoon is an exciting and interesting and dynamic discussion of the issues and potential solutions, because there are lots of challenges right now, but that presents many opportunities for new directions forward. And that's what I hope starts to come from today. New collaborations, new partnerships, and new conversations. I'd like to thank the sponsors, since I only have this one opportunity, for believing in us and helping us with this event. I would like to thank the COS marketing and communications team, without whom this would not have happened. They're an amazing team, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. So please have a great afternoon, and I hope to hear from some of you in the near future. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Graham, wherever you are. Moving on, I would like to invite Dr. Liz Klonoff, our VP for Research here at the university, to give us an introduction and some marching orders. Dr. Klonoff.
No one told me about marching orders. My goodness. So, I remember the last time you all met, I stood here in the same way, and I was equally excited then as I am now. And let me just tell you a couple of things. I'm not really going to babble on forever, I promise, although, it is within my skill set. When I first got here, they were talking about the clusters, and I kind of had my own definition of cluster. And when it was really the coastal cluster that helped me begin to understand the benefit that can come from interdisciplinary work. Because you really can't think about Florida and the coast without realizing that you need everyone. If you're really going to make a difference, you need everyone. You need the economist. You need the policy people. You need the biology people. You need the geologists. You need the emergency management people. You need absolutely everyone if we're going to make a difference here. And interestingly enough, I'm going to read you something, because I just recently heard this term, and I realized that this kind of, you probably all know this, so I'm going to now I'm going to spray the air with my ignorance, so be prepared. But I just heard this, and it seems like such a good definition, and it came from the World Bank, and that's the blue economy. All right, yeah, you see everyone? All right, so I'm happy to be the ignorant person in the room, but it's such a good definition. And it so encompasses what all of you are going to do this afternoon that I'm going to read it as an introduction. Sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem. What a wonderful goal. And what a wonderful afternoon I hope you have today, because you are really on the forefront of the blue economy. And it is going to be critical going forward that Florida remains on the forefront of the blue economy. That said, it is my pleasure now to actually, notice that little transition. That said, it is my pleasure to introduce Senator Linda Stewart. Hang on. And so, Senator Stewart actually represents us here. And so when I first looked at her biography and I saw all of the references to the Sierra Club, I thought, that helps me understand why she's speaking here. But the other reason why I'm glad she's here is she has been an indefatigable advocate for UCF. She has worked in both houses, which is an amazing statement in and of itself. She has worked in both houses, regardless of the administration, to continue to push forward an agenda that emphasizes the health and well-being of her constituents, particularly those here in Central Florida. Just last week, I'm glad you reminded me, just yesterday, the governor signed the bill that gave UCF $29 million towards the College of Nursing, and the senator was really primarily responsible for that. So I'm going to give her 29 million thanks and introduce her. Senator.
I was pretty excited with the 29 million yesterday because I got a lot vetoed, but that one stayed, so I was real happy about that. So good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today with the Coastal Vision program and inviting me out. And, you know, I think that this program is going to be very beneficial to those of us who serve in the legislatures. Bills and requests for funding and finding out what is needed for the community, particularly the coastal. I know someone think, well, we don't even live on the coast. Why are you worried about it? I'm worried about it. It doesn't matter if you live there. Look at the condominiums that fell to the ground. You know, we have been able to put some legislation out at the special session to deal with that again. So we should be very concerned about everything that is involved with the coastal communities, not just because we live in Central Florida and we don't have that closeness to the coast, but we need to be very conscious of what we're doing to the coast. The algae blooms and all that goes on. We have to know a little bit about everything. Protecting and preserving our state environment is just a long time issue that we've had, and sometimes we don't get the recognition that we need out of the government, and we just have to keep pushing the agenda forward with making sure people understand how important it is to have that discussion. And I had served on the Environmental and Natural Resource Committee as vice chair, and that's what I do when I'm there. I try to push forward issues that are very important to all of us in various ways. I was instrumental in getting $30 million for our manatees. That wasn't nearly enough, but we got some, and you can't always get everything you want, but we try real hard. And also, I did a lot with Florida Forever and land preservation. I got $100 million. We need $400 million, but you know, we get what we can get. And so we did that. Other endangered species, the tortoise, and a lot of that, I have been instrumental in trying to protect at the state level. And all the resiliency projects that come before me, I think that it's important that we recognize how important that is. Throughout my years in the legislature, though, I have filed bills focusing on the environmental issues such as regulation for auxiliary plastics in packaging and removal of toxic chemicals in the sunscreen. Setting a funding floor for the land conservation, the Florida Forever, and developing a comprehensive waste reduction program for the state. So those are some of the projects that I have worked on and continue to work on. I get disappointed when I can't get what I want, but you know, sometimes you get some and you don't get others. I'm really concerned about the sunscreen and the plastics and its impact on the corals. I just think that the fishermen write to me all the time, and the skin divers write to me all the time, and they actually have their eyes on the coral and how badly it's diminished. And you know, although I don't skin dive, I just listen to what they have to say because I'm sure they're right. Recently, the legislators we did in special session added back in the condo safety, which we had it in the Senate, but the House wouldn't pick it up. So we left 2 months ago without having any safety precautions for condominium. And so when we had the special session, we were able to bring that bill back in, and it passed unanimously, actually. So that was good. We have 21 million Floridians living within 60 miles of the coast of our state. And we just have an obligation to them and the others that live in the state because of climate change. And we all see climate change in Central Florida. We see it all over the state, no matter where you live. We are impacted by climate change. And the sooner we recognize that where we're going and what needs to be done, the better we're going to be off as those who live here and do business here and go to school here in Florida. So I'm proud to represent the University of Central Florida. I'm very happy to hear about this group. I did not know you had been trying to get this together for 2 years, but I guess the longer you wait, the better ideas you have. So we're hoping that this forum here that finally got together in person, that we will be able to hear back from you. And we have a resiliency officer that we put on board about, I think it was 2 years ago. He hasn't had much chance to dig into what needs to be done, but I'm going to be meeting with him. And I think your group would be very good to meet with our resiliency officer and with me, and try to, when you have a plan that you would like to see something move forward with it, I think we can do something. I think we can help you, and I'm anxious to help you. I think this is a unique program from what I've heard and what I've read, and I think that it'll improve, and if we could implement any of the things that you recommend, I think it's going to be better for all Floridians. And I'm just here to serve, and you're certainly, I've got an open door. You just come in and talk to me. I will be more than happy to hear your concerns, see if there's anything we can do with a bill or appropriations, and we'll just keep moving forward. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Senator Stewart and Dr. Klonoff, for getting us started today. You may have noticed we started a few minutes late. We had a small problem with the parking garage. We're going to try to make up that time, probably later in the day with the social hour, but it'll happen. I wanted to do a few other things, and I cannot see this, but I wanted to orient you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then we're going to get started into the day's activities. So the first part of the orientation is talking about the core UCF Coastal team. And I say core because the university created this faculty cluster initiative in 2016. And so on the screen now you should see the core faculty, which include Graham and I. Graham is the director. I am dubbed the science director, although I don't direct everyone's science. These are awesome scientists I work with. But we also have, and if you could stand up, Thomas Wall, Sergio Alvarez, and Christy Lewis, all PhDs from different departments on campus as the core of the UCF Coastal. Beyond that, thank you all. Beyond that, we have an absolute ton of secondary joint appointments and faculty affiliates that I am sometimes ashamed to say do more than I do for UCF Coastal as well. So on the screen now, you should see the list of the faculty affiliates to UCF Coastal. And I would ask any of the faculty affiliates that are here to please stand up so you can be recognized. I know there's some of you here. These are the people you need to be talking to, along with the core folks, if we're going to solve these tricky coastal problems from within UCF. I would like to also recognize our sponsors. Today, we have several sponsors, and now I have to read a very, very small list. But you can see them up here. We have gold sponsors, we have black sponsors, and we have table sponsors. Each provided valuable assets to make this day go on, and I'm not going to try to read it from the small list. Thank you, sponsors. And although Graham recognized the College of Marketing and College of Science Marketing and Communications team, I'd like to recognize them by name, because without this, it wouldn't happen. Mary Grace Slobodnik is in the back of the room. She was awesome in making this happen. Joshua Sweet, who's outside, also instrumental, and Judy Froelich were the three people that really helped to pull this all together. And my final word of thanks before we really get going, if you look to the center of your tables, you're going to see these beautiful centerpieces. These were created by the UCF Arboretum, specifically put together by the Learning by Leading students at the UCF Arboretum. And not only were these put together by them, but all of these wildflowers come from our Arboretum. So please admire them throughout the day. All right, moving on, I think, and Mary Grace will tell me if I'm not right. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the run of show, how things are going to work for the rest of the day. I got a head nod, so look, I'm doing it right, Mom. We're going to have 2 sessions this afternoon. Each is going to be about an hour and a half long, separated by, and this is important, a 30-minute networking break in between, right? These 2 1.5-hour panels are meant to be interactive, as Graham said. We're going to have panelists up here that are going to tell you a little bit about who they are, what they're doing in the realm of resilience, and where they think we need to go. But then it's really going to hopefully turn into a discussion between these panelists, which are only 4 views in the 100 of different views that are out there. The key here is discussion. Now, I'd like to, again, recognize Dr. Christy Lewis. Christy has volunteered to recap the day. So Christy will be taking notes throughout all of our conversations, and will come up at the end of the day to give us a nice and tidy recap of everything we've decided we're going to do. Along those lines, as we get to the discussion, we have a microphone that Mary Grace will run around expediently. So if you have a question, please wait till the microphone gets to you. This way, everyone can hear it, and we can record it so that we can take action on it and it's not lost. And so, without further ado, I believe that we're going to go into our first session. Again, feel free to get refreshments or use the restroom as we transition. And our first panel, I think, should be up on the screen. Is it? Yes. Our first panel, and I hope that all of our panelists were here. They weren't all here before, but I see most of them. I will introduce them here, but allow them to give you the background credentials about themselves that they think you need. Otherwise, we'd be standing up here all day talking about accolades. So the first panel, which is about resilient communities and ecosystems, will be Eddie Bauza from the Florida DEP, Joseph Schmidt from the Nature Conservancy, Dr. Akeem Sadiq from our very own UCF, and Dr. Randy Parkinson from FIU. And I'd like to invite them all to the stage at this time. All right. So I'm just going to give you all again a charge for the next little while as we discuss these things, and I would like to ask you to go in the following order. Eddie first. All right. And Joseph second. Akeem third, and Randy with our final wrap up. We have talked several times about this, but I've asked them to share their current resilience initiatives, what they're doing in their different organizations that is driving resilience, either for communities or for ecosystems, and then provide us a glimpse into the future, right? Where they see resilience initiatives going, what they see the major roadblocks to resilience and where they think we need to go. And then we'll open it up for a broader discussion. And Eddie, please take it away. Sure.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name's Eddie Boza. I've heard Bowza, Booza, Bozo. Kindergarten was wonderful. With the clown show that was out. Sort of traumatizing, but I'm over it. I'm here with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I have the opportunity to be a public administrator, and I've been in state and local government for about 10 years now. I'm a garden variety biology student. I don't call myself a biologist, but I wanted to be a teacher. I taught in a lab for a few years at Florida State, where I went to undergraduate, and I'm studying now to get a master's in public administration. And to have a chance to work in the Resilient Florida program is really amazing for me personally and in the profession that I want to be in. This is a new program that was established through the legislature. The senator that was here voted for the bill that established our program, so I wanted to thank her for this opportunity because the bill that established the program was unanimously approved through both the House, the Senate, supported by the governor, and obviously it's led to now this Chief Resilience Officer who will be in the governor's office as well. But to have a chance to be a part of that, and I'm working in the planning and the policy section, so we're really developing the framework for what we think resilience looks like in Florida. Both coastal and non-coastal communities are facing threats, some of them unique to their area and some of them not so unique. It rains there too. You know, everyone wants to say, well, in inland, you know, they have different threats, but you know, they might not have sea level rise or storm surge, but you know, they've got other things going on like groundwater, rainfall, intensified storms. So our program is set up to assist local governments, so counties and municipalities, and providing financial support to plan for and adapt to those changing conditions like sea level rise and those changes in storm events, intensity, frequency, et cetera. Significant investment in the past year. The next year is looking out to be also pretty significant. We actually, in the budget that they talked about getting signed yesterday was $270 million for local governments to do implementation projects to strengthen critical facilities, infrastructure, community buildings, emergency facilities, stormwater, wastewater infrastructure. So a lot of good things going on through the program. We also have a planning arm where we're providing funding for local governments to conduct vulnerability assessments with a requirement to have future conditions in your model, including NOAA's 2040, 2070, intermediate high, intermediate low. So we're really trying to drive the planning effort for communities to assess what their vulnerability is, identify their critical assets that they need to protect, and then providing funding to help implement some of those strategies. So I think I covered what I was supposed to do. I got a little nervous with the marching orders and the direction that I was given, and now I'm recorded, and there's gonna be notes at the end. So, but I'm happy to talk more about the future. I think, are we gonna do that all at once, or are we gonna do that after? Okay, so nice to meet you guys.
I'm Joe Schmidt with the Nature Conservancy. I am the Climate Strategy Director, and basically for the Florida chapter here. And most of my focus recently has been on coastal resilience projects that demonstrate nature-based features, nature-based solutions, and kind of incorporating green features into our traditional gray infrastructure in southeast Florida. My background is environmental engineering from UCF. I'm a professional engineer, and I've been working a lot in, well, previously to the Nature Conservancy, I worked with the South Florida Water Management District, where my focus was large-scale habitat restoration, and also working with our intergovernment reps to kind of provide grants and assistance to local governments who are also kind of addressing our larger challenges in the South Florida region related to water supply, water quality, and our degraded natural systems. And so, working for the Nature Conservancy is kind of unique in terms of working for a nonprofit, in terms of also kind of connecting, governments and large corporate donors and folks that are very interested in this work. There's a lot of interest in coastal resilience and nature-based solutions right now. You may be aware of that. And really, where this work is now is it's really kind of in its infancy here in Florida. There, you may have heard about living shorelines and other, green infrastructure that has been used for stormwater management. But in terms of like large scale, or not large scale, but, broad implementation of nature-based solutions and green-gray infrastructure for coastal defenses is relatively novel. And so where we kind of saw ourselves fitting into this puzzle was trying to implement some demonstrations. We have a number of 3 demonstrations in Southeast Florida where we are trying to basically ground truth a lot of the scientific and scientific literature regarding the benefits for coastal resilience that nature and natural infrastructure provides. So that's kind of what I've been working on. And in terms of, looking for the future, obviously climate adaptation is very important for Florida. It's definitely on top of mind of everyone who kind of lives here or experiences high tide flooding, hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, and also just, the implications of retreating from the coast, changes in migration patterns where people might, relocate to escape some of these areas, and kind of the broader social implications that they may have. Our ultimate goal for the Nature Conservancy, or what our objectives are related to climate, is really reduction of emissions and mitigation, and kind of working with key stakeholders and non-traditional partners here in Florida to try to influence and build the business case for doing so at the state level and also nationally. And so in terms of coastal resilience, where I think it really needs to go, or where I see improvements, is we've got to do more. We've got to do more to protect people from storm surge and sea level rise. We need to implement more innovative approaches to how we build on the coast, or even maybe how we retreat back from the coast. Areas of opportunity where we can kind of bring in green and nature-based features that have been degraded or impacted, through our past development actions. And really, most of the benefits related to kind of natural infrastructure are kind of at that landscape scale. And so, one-off projects here and there are great, and I think they provide a lot of value and lift for a local or a localized area. But I think, we need to start thinking, like, how do we incorporate this, along our coasts, Biscayne Bay, the Indian River Lagoon, Tampa Bay. These are the areas that are very vulnerable and experiencing the real impacts of climate change today, in terms of higher temperatures, algae blooms, increased eutrophication from runoff. I mean, these are all things that climate seems to exacerbate. And so I always like to say that, even the Department of Defense considers climate change and the impacts of climate, kind of a threat multiplier, and we're kind of coming up against the realization that the way that we've developed and operated and maintained our communities along the coast has not been consistent with providing, being good stewards of these resources that benefit everyone. And, Florida is, for all intents and purposes, a coastal state. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, given how close we are and proximal to the coast. And, so when I think of, Florida, I always, you can't not think of Florida and not think of the coast. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdul Hakim Sadiq. I'm an associate professor at the School of Public Administration here at UCF. In terms of my background, I was originally from Nigeria. I got my PhD in public policy here, at Georgia State and Georgia Tech, the joint program. And since then, I've been, in fact, my background in terms of how I started working on resilience-related issues I was as a graduate student at Georgia Tech. My initial interest was to do health policy. You all know there's a lot of money there, right? So as a graduate student, I wanted to do, focus on health policy. But then I didn't get an environmental policy, which is a good thing, right? But I didn't have any assistantship. And one day, a new professor that we hired came in and was looking for a graduate assistant to work with him to study earthquakes. What? Earthquakes, yeah. In Memphis, Tennessee. So I said, yeah, I'm interested, So anyway, I came on board and we went to Memphis and studied how organizations were preparing for earthquakes. So it's some sort of resilience in a sense, right? So that's kind of how I got into the business. And then I changed my minor into emergency management, disaster management. And when I graduated, I started working on those issues. But then a few years ago, I worked with a colleague of mine while I was at Indiana University, and we got a National Science Foundation grant to study community flood risk management. And so the real question we're trying to understand is that why do communities participate in a federal voluntary flood risk management program? We know why communities participate in programs that are sort of have mandates, like the carrot and stick approach. If you don't do this, you get punished. If you do this, you get rewarded. But voluntary programs, why do communities participate? And we don't really know much about that. And so that was the basis of that National Science Foundation grant and what I have been working on for the last 5 years or so. So my focus really, along with some of my colleagues, has been on trying to understand why communities participate in FEMA's Community Rating System program. For some of you might not know about the program. It's sort of an offshoot. It sort of came as a need to due to the need to reduce the impact of disaster further in communities. We know about the MFI program, National Science Foundation, National Flood Insurance Program, excuse me. But we realize that even though that program exists and billions of dollars, according to FEMA, have been saved annually, we still need to reduce the impact of flood on communities further. And so the CRS, the Community Rating System Program, was formed in 1990 to incentivize communities who are already participating in the MFI program to do additional measures, flood risk management measures. For instance, if you can build a new dam in your dam or flood or levees or something, when you do those 19 creditable activities, then you get points. When your points total reaches a particular threshold, then you can get discounted flood insurance for the community that is participating. So that's kind of how it works, but it's voluntary. So that's what I've been studying for the past few years, and there have been some interesting findings that have led to FEMA actually asking us to participate in workshop with them and see how we can sort of reconstitute the program and make changes to the program. And some of the things are, so one of the questions that we've answered is, we've tried to address is why do communities participate? And the reason for that is that researchers have already established a positive correlation between disaster reduction, flood risk impact reduction, and participation in that program. So in other words, the program is good, it works. But the question really remains unanswered. The question that needs to be answered is that why do we have only 5% of eligible communities still participating in the program? 5% only participating. What's wrong with the other 95%? So that's what we sought out to answer. And what we found is that participation really, what motivates a community to participate is the benefits they get. So they want to get reductions in their premium, flood insurance premium, so they participate because of that. Now, on the other flip side, why are they not participating? The number one factor is that they need resources. FEMA's process of paperwork to join is incredibly taxing. And so communities don't have, most of them, smaller communities don't have the resources to do all the paperwork to even join. So that's sort of interesting, right? You think, something like that could easily be addressed. So we made a recommendation to FEMA that, well, you need to provide some sort of services to these smaller communities if you want them to participate. So I'll stop there for now, and then hopefully continue the conversation. The other aspects of the CRS that we've looked at, and we've had some findings, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy Parkinson. I'm a research faculty member at Florida International University. I published my first paper on climate change 35 years ago, 1987, where I described the potential effects of sea level rise on South Florida coastal wetlands. At that time, the concentration of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere was 360 parts per million. Today, it's 417. At that time, sea level rise was, on average, increasing about 4 millimeters a year. It's now 10. And a foot of rise is projected by mid-century, although it's highly likely that that will be exceeded because we have made no substantial progress in greenhouse gas emissions. So I was asked to talk a little bit about in the natural environment. I have also worked a lot in resiliency of built environment. I published a paper, the first one that came out after the Surfside collapse, that about the speculation of climate change and sea level rise on the collapse of that building. The building was, the basement floor was being elevations of sea level and groundwater were 65% of the year by the time it collapsed. But with regards to the natural environment, the rate of sea level rise today is 10 millimeters. There are no coastal wetlands that can keep pace with that rise in sea level. They're through the production accumulation of organic matter. That rate has already been exceeded. And their capacity to migrate landward has been significantly obstructed by infrastructure, roads and levees and the like, which block their ability to migrate into newly expanding areas that are created by rising sea level. And furthermore, their resiliency has been compromised by the historical dewatering of the Everglades, which has changed the hydroperiod and the salinity of the soils. So the system is in disarray at the moment. I have a paper that came out this week with some colleagues in the journal Geomorphology just this week, where we predict by the end of this century the extant wetlands of the Everglades will be underwater. And that's the magnitude of the effect that climate change is having on the natural environment. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about storminess, increased tropical storms and hurricanes. Of course, we've already had one pass through. It's June 3rd. We've already had one pre-storm season move across Mexico. We have another one that's moving up the coast, and we have one that's off of Hispaniola, 3 of them, one before the official start of the season, and 2 of them on day 3. Hurricane Emma, when it came through South Florida, it damaged 62% of the mangrove plant communities down there, and 2,000 hectares were completely defoliated. So we can expect, with increased storminess, that these risks to our natural environment are just going to skyrocket. And of course, the same goes for coastal built communities as well, just more and more stress. I've done a lot of work on coastal estuaries, finished a 3-year project funded by the National Estuary Program out of the Indian River Lagoon. That's been published in the Journal of Coastal Management, where we looked at the risks to the mission of the program with specific to water quality and ecosystem function, that what was at risk by climate change. And in particular, we came up with changing patterns of precipitation, increased storminess, and sea level rise. And what we determined was there will be a substantial threat to water quality and ecosystem function from increased nutrient loadings from wastewater treatment plants, on-site treatment and disposal systems, and stormwater conveyance systems. They're being subjected to an environment for which they were not designed, whether that be intermediate inundation, permanent submergence, physical damage through storms or coastal erosion. We have an ongoing study with the EPA where we're looking at developing a living shoreline location suitability tool that considers future landscape changes caused by sea level rise. We've heard living shorelines being mentioned quite a bit here. And the questions that we've raised are, will these be resilient to sea level rise? Like, what are the bases by which we are determining where these installations can go? And for the most part, it's where they can go, where people will let them be. And this may or may not be conducive to sea level rise if they don't have any place to migrate. So we're putting that together. We are not using 3 of the 6 NOAA sea level rise scenarios. You can forget about the low, the intermediate low, and the intermediate. We're using intermediate high, high, and extreme, because the other ones we've missed. And likely even the extreme will be overshot because of the greenhouse emissions reduction deficits here. So what's next? At this point, I'm reminded of the fact that I'm often referred to as Dr. Doom. And sometimes I feel that way. I've been doing this for more than 35 years. And we already have passed the tipping point of no return, right? We are not going back to conditions of pre-industrial revolution, 270 parts per million. You can forget about that, right? Carbon dioxide has a half-life. It's hundreds of years old, so even if we stopped today, the climate would still change and temperatures would still rise for some time to come. But after decades of inaction, decades, we have seen significant progress over the last 5 years. And I'll point out a few of those. And large-scale projects, which are pinnacle to our overall ability to deal with this. The Everglades is now undergoing massive rehydration projects to rehydrate fresh water into environments that had been drained for decades. And they are elevating some of those obstructions, those topographic barriers. They've moved a huge section of Highway 41. It's now off of the ground, allowing water to be delivered naturally towards the coastline. There have been substantial investments by our water management districts to capture and treat surface water, major investments totaling billions and billions of dollars. And conversion of septic to municipal services is now underway in every county, every coastal county. So we've made substantial progress. And the question is, will these projects come online at the pace and scale to make a difference at the end? And we can't know that right now. But we should continue to advocate for practical, science-based actions to both mitigate and adapt to climate change. As I often say at the end of discussions like this, people say, well, why do we even bother? Well, a healthy patient is much more apt to respond to stress or disease than an unhealthy patient. So we have to do everything we can to restore our natural environments and thereby enhance their resiliency to climate change. Any and all ideas should be considered, and those that are appropriate should be constructed. And the bottom line about all this is we're doing this for future generations so they can enjoy the intrinsic values of the natural environment, but also the ecosystem services that they provide, whether that's stormwater buffer, saltwater intrusion, you name it. I mean, they are undervalued. So I'm pleased to have been able to participate here. I think I have watched the state and the NGOs evolve over the last decade, and certainly over the last 5 years. There's a lot of good work going on, and this is a perfect opportunity to share that and get ideas as we need to, accelerate both the pace and scale at which we're attempting to address this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for getting us started. I would like to open up for questions, but I would, before we do that, like everyone to think about a few things, because I'm going to be asking the audience as many, if not more, questions than I'm going to be asking the panel. And those will include what examples, and we just heard some from Dr. Doom over here. You know, I was the disaster doc. I used to say it's not a disaster till I show up, but it looks like someone has beat me. What are some examples where community inclusion and participation have happened where you live or where you work that we can learn from and maybe apply to other places? What are some other examples of successes in your worlds that we might want to share and learn about today? And of course, what are some of those roadblocks? So while you think about those, are there any pressing questions for the panel, or should I start off? All right, wait for the microphone, please, so we can record your question.
Hi, I have a question for Mr. Parkinson. I'm Josh Bailey, geospatial data scientist with SWCA Environmental Consultants. Could you tell us a bit more about your living shoreline suitability tool that you're working on?
Sure, thanks for asking. Basically, my colleagues that I'm working with from FIU, they had done a project for Coral Gables where they put together myriad layers of information from census and other that included demographics, elevations, businesses, tax value, and so forth. And then you could select what elevation of sea level rise you wanted to look at the impact that have, and whether or not there was a storm surge, FEMA storm surge on top of that. And then it would show you what it was prior to and as a consequence of those conditions. And it spit out with readily available histograms with values of property that were inundated, the loss of business, tax base, the ethnicity, and so on and so forth. And so what we're doing on this is we are going to introduce bathymetry, or DMs, along the shoreline, and then run scenarios that at the end of the rise, like who owns that land, what is the land use, so that folks can maybe think about, well, here, if we constructed here, we'll know the ownership, because most of this is publicly owned land. It's rare to be private. So you could buy publicly owned land. And this is actually to augment the work that Melinda and UCF has done a lot of this suitability analysis of current conditions, which this will be able to be integrated into and with. And then you could see, like, well, this has a very high chance, the slope is low, there's no topographic barriers, the land behind that is submerging is natural, it's not a parking lot, or it's public land, and so forth. So that is that's what we're doing.
Very good. Is there a way that we could keep up with proceedings on that, or is there anywhere I could check it out?
Sure. I mean, you can. You have my contact information. You give me your card, and I'd be happy to. I mean, eventually, this is an EPA project. It'll be publicly available. But as you know, we have about 20. I don't even know how many partners at federal, state, local. We will be having workshops to train them in how to use. We're getting their input on what parameters to consider, because we do not want this to be another dashboard that gets lost. And I think this is an important element of this conversation. You know, when especially academics, but have ideas and that, but they never get really fully utilized because the practitioners don't think of it that way. So this whole thing has been designed, as should any of these types of projects, to mitigate with the folks on the ground that are charged, and those are usually like county and state, they're employed people that are charged with that resource. They're getting their input. It's just so that the look of I just sent a dashboard out. It was produced by Climate Central. I said, here's the homepage. Are you chill with that? Does it look like inviting? Do you get all the knobs and buttons and whistles and boxes? So, this is a lesson that I've learned over the many years that I've been involved with this is not telling people what they should do, but getting their ideas and helping them make it so they can do it.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Randy. I'm going to lead off with another success. If you look over here to the right corner, you'll see this banner called Hazard Aware. Like Randy in this EPA grant, we received a grant from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and I have 19 co-PIs across 10 institutions developing an awareness of hazards, but more than that, how that awareness can be translated in what you can do on the ground as a homeowner or a renter to mitigate those hazards. So, Randy, if you need a place for that stuff to stay long term, this hazard aware might be the way forward. With that success, because I think we have come quite a long way. I mean, I started doing GIS in 1993 when it was all command line, and now we swim in data. So much data that we know some of it's not good, and we don't know what to do with it all. So I think we're making tremendous progress, and I would like to hear from other people, panelists or others, about what sort of successes you're seeing in your workplace, in your disciplines, in your communities.
Hi, thank you. I'm Nan Summers, and one that's very visual and crystal clear is when I worked for the Restore Acts in Manatee County to administer the $20 million that came in for our resolution, and each one, we had 18 projects, was 110 pages as a certificate of go forward, and I'd come up with a stack of those. But on the last presentation, I had one piece of paper that had a grid, because we took 20,000 clams and planted them in the most damaged part of a marina. A handful of people, a little kid that could barely talk was throwing them in there. And that only took one sheet of paper. And the only reason we had that was to make sure that the next batch of clams that we put in, because the limitation was the refrigerated truck that took the clams to keep them alive to get there, so they could only do 6,000 at a time. So we put 6,000 here, 6,000 there, and that's all we needed. So I had this stack here, and then a group of people who were able to save clams that were not able to be consumed by the restaurant business, but went into mitigation, biological mitigation, and filtering up to 50 gallons of water per clam per day with a shelf life of more than 30 years. So I consider that a very graphic way to say people can do something when they want to.
Thanks a lot, Nan, for that. I see that as a call to inclusion and partnership and participation with communities. I know that in where I come from, we started with we're going to do research on this community. Then we started saying, we're going to do research for this community, right? But now we're starting to get to, and I think this is some of what Randy was saying and Dr. Sadiq here was saying, with actually embedding with communities to do research with communities, and so, and action with communities. So thanks a lot for that, Nan. Any other examples of successes that we'd like to share?
Hi. Oh, I don't need to stand. I guess I'm standing. I'm Jen Locke. I just finished my PhD with UCF Biology, and I worked with Dr. Donnelly's group and Dr. Walter's group and my PI, Dr. Jeffrey Cook, and we looked at a different community, which is the fish community response to the living shoreline and oyster reef restoration. So I just want to, while I have a chance, give some good news about how effective restoration is at improving the ecological community. I focused on sport fish, which are fishes that are targeted by anglers, so they have a high recreational value, and that helps kind of drive some interest in restoration, and a lot of the fishing groups get involved with it. And the good news is that these sport fish, like snappers and snook and sea trout, responded extremely well to the restored sites. In some cases, they had higher abundances at restored sites than at live or dead reefs, or equivalent to the natural shorelines. And that also carried into their sizes were larger at restored sites, and it carried into their food web. I looked at different metrics of the trophic community, so what they eat, looking at that quantitatively as well. And the restored sites match the live reefs within 1 year of restoration. So it's really great news when the habitat itself is improved for other species, and that can carry up into the rest of the ecological community, as well as generating, helping the economy locally for those species. So that's all.
I missed your first name? Jen. Jen, hi. So in terms of real-time collaboration, we need to talk during our networking, because we have a grant through Brevard County where we are looking at fishing effort by recreational within the lagoon as a proxy for water quality and health trends, parallel to seagrass, but we think might even be more important, a means of tracking the health and trying to figure out what the specific issues are that are resulting in their decline and the collapse of the food web. But in any event, this will be driven by interviews with recreational commercial fishing persons and guides, and it's very, they hold that information very tight, so the scale at which we can show this is quite large, and we have to burn after reading. Right, exactly. So the pixels are big. But anyway, we're going to integrate that with water quality parameters and bathymetry and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm not really sure how that overlaps, but when you mentioned the fisheries in that, I thought, well, it would be good for us to connect, and maybe you could share with your research and I could pass it on. We're working with the, oops. I'll come back to that idea when I remember it. But anyway, thank you.
I think perhaps both of you should connect with one of the speakers from our second panel, Sarah Fangman, because she has a deep interest in corals, which coincide. Dr. Wall?
Okay. Hi, everyone. You heard in the introduction that I'm a civil engineer on the coastal team, but my background is really more in coastal engineering / physical coastal oceanography, and my work really focuses on sea level and storm surges. And we've heard a lot about sea level rise, and it's obviously one of the biggest problems that we are facing here in Florida as far as climate change impacts go. It's not the only one. Some good news from the sea level science perspective. For a long time, the projections that we had, and Randy mentioned some of these recent rates of sea level rise that have been observed. For a long time, the projections that we had were all global mean sea level rise projections. So we had a pretty good idea what the global mean sea level rise would look like, which is very interesting to know from a global climate change, and as a climate scientist, very interesting to see these projections emerge and the uncertainties around them. But at the same time, they're very useless for on-the-ground local adaptation, because one thing with sea level is that it's not rising the same everywhere. We will see very different sea level rise here in Florida as we will see in other parts of the world and even in other parts of this country. And recent progress in sea level science now really allows us to understand the processes that are leading to these local, regional local variations in sea level rise and providing more accurate and more helpful, still uncertain because we don't know what the emissions will be in the future, but better estimates to be used for localized adaptation and response. And we are part of the NASA Sea Level Science team. We're working on a project in my group with a lot of partners. And if you go to sealevel.nasa.gov, you will see a really nice new sea level change and sea level projections tool where you can click on any part of the US coastline and it'll give you more localized projections and also more information about what are the main processes driving sea level rise in your area. And that helps us as scientists to better project what the future could look like. So it's still bad news, it's still rising pretty much everywhere, I can tell you that. except maybe for parts of the Baltic, where the land is actually uplifting faster than sea level is rising, but that will also change at some point. But at least we now have better information that we can use at the local scale for adaptation planning.
Eddie?
So our program is pretty new, so I don't know if I can really tout, successes, but a couple of things came to mind. We have had some successes in getting funding. So a couple of things that we're working on and also approved in the recent budget. We did get some funding to do some living shoreline stuff. So it sounds like there's interested people in the room. That would be kind of a parallel to, it sounds like, what you're doing, or maybe even actually doing some pilots to go and, I think you mentioned ground truthing things, do some pilot projects in different areas and different conditions and see, what works and what doesn't in a couple years. So that's really exciting. We have also Florida Seafloor Mapping Initiative. Has anybody heard of that? Cool. So we're going to endeavor to map the entire seafloor off the coast of Florida from 0 to 20 meters and develop a 1 meter DEM. So getting topo bathy and putting boats out there if we have to in some of those murky areas or turbid areas. But that's a big effort. It's like a $80 million proposal. So we're working with NOAA right now to identify areas that have already been collected, asking for any areas, from other partners that might have done flights so that we're not overlapping, projecting schedules of what is going to be flown so that we don't plan to fly that. So ultimately, we hope that the entire coast of Florida will have bathymetric data, swimming in data. So that's really cool. And then I wanted to mention one more thing, and I can't remember what it is because I just got so excited about living shorelines and getting bathymetry, but it'll come to me.
We'll jump to Randy and then.
Yeah, I can tell you what you're thinking. Not really, but there is the point about local sea level rise signals, because the global is the global, and even in the work that we've done in South Florida, it's very different than, for various reasons, the Gulf Stream and so on and so forth. But the state now has a rule called the slip rule, where any coastal construction, and they define what that means, coastal, how many thousand feet, but that uses state money, has to do an analysis of vulnerability to sea level rise. They don't have to do anything about it once they get it done, but it's a first step. But they're required to use a tide gauge that is proximal to the site. And they are also required to use to get their ground truth, and then the intermediate high. So the state has already is not even thinking about the 3 lower sea level rise scenarios that NOAA published back in 2017 and remain sort of in place today. They've gone to the intermediate high, which is the high and the extreme above that. But the state's already figured that out. But to the point there, we are seeing the state finally begin to get involved in how things are constructed and where they're constructed and what information is being used to make those decisions. It's still, these things don't have any teeth, but they're, as I mentioned, it's just taking place. Things are starting to happen that would have been unheard of 5 years ago, so I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, slip is, like that thing at work that you were working on like right now, and it's kind of bugging you, but you're like happy to do it and you're proud of it and all that. That's slip for me right now, because we're trying to evolve the tool. We're trying to see how can we make it better, how can we, incorporate future conditions. I'm working on scopes of work for contractors to, do maintenance of the site, which that's just thrilling work. But the other thing I did want to mention was the Florida Flood Hub. This is out of the College of Marine Science at USF, was also established through the bill that established our program. And we're hoping that the Flood Hub is going to begin to create these localized Florida sea level rise data sets. And we think that that's part of their charge. And we expect that a lot of the information that we get through our funding of vulnerability assessments and all the data that we might receive about assets and areas in different areas of the state can kind of be housed there as the central data source. Open source data that the state or researchers can use, we hope will come out of that Florida Flood Hub at the USF site. So,
And speaking of USF, I'm going to put someone on the spot. We have Monty Graham here. Mary Grace, if you could give Monty I'm going to slow roll this. We were talking about boats and bathymetry and boating and reefs and all sorts of water activities. And I wanted to give Monty just a quick opportunity. Sorry, Monty, I know we didn't even talk about this. To tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does, because I think it might be very important and interesting to many of you. Monty?
Sure. I can play the piano too if you'd like. Oh, stand up. So my name's Monty Graham. I am the director of the Florida Institute of Oceanography. I think the segue with USF is that our host institution is USF, but we are statewide. Our primary mission are the 12 SUS, State University System universities, and we have a couple dozen other affiliate associate members that range from private sector to nonprofits, Aquaria, state agencies, DEP, FWC, FWRI are members of the FIO consortium. So we're quasi-statewide state agency, but we're really housed under the Board of Governors. We do operate research vessels and a marine lab down in the Florida Keys called the Keys Marine Lab. I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. This is not, I didn't know I was going to be doing this, so it's not really going to be a commercial. This was going to be something that I think is a success story, and it does relate to FIO at the state level, but it's, you have in the title resilient communities and ecosystems, and communities of people are usually at some defined, municipal, county, state, whatever. But the regionalization of management that we're now seeing is a huge step forward, because the ecosystems part, they don't understand those geopolitical boundaries. And so, I think as long as we're thinking in terms of management with regional partnerships, that is going to continue to be the way that we succeed. So thanks.
Thanks, Monty. So if you need to do research on the ocean, or possibly the bays and inland waters, then talk to Monty, because he might be able to help you. Panel, I would like to ask you a question, unless...
I would just add that another big win was DeSantis vetoing the net metering bill. I thought that was in line with, I think, where we wanted to take clean energy in the state. So, and also the Resilient Florida funding that has incentivized nature-based features in kind of the selection process for those projects. And I would just echo that, from my perspective, a lot of this work is built on partnering with federal agencies, local municipalities, non-government organizations, and the private sector, and to kind of bring these projects forward and to kind of think innovatively about how to move the needle, so to speak.
I'm wondering, Joe, if you're reading my notes, because my question to the board, or the panel, was, do you have any examples of community inclusion or participation where it has worked? And then conversely, possibly where it hasn't worked, because we have to learn from our mistakes.
Sure. I think top of mind for me would be the Resilient 305 strategy down in the Miami-Dade region. That was a long, not drawn out, but involved process involving the public at large and a lot of stakeholders to decide on priorities for their region in terms of addressing the impacts of climate change, addressing social community issues within their space regarding transportation, access to services, and affordable housing, transportation. I think all of those things kind of intersected. And, it's a great document, and it's kind of high level. And there's many, many good things in there in terms of, a vision for a region. And I think that's ultimately what they were trying to do, is capture kind of, what does the greater Miami region, aspire to be, given all the risk and threats for it. That was a couple years ago that came out, but that's a good example of, I think, this partnering with the scientific, research community, business, the Chamber of Commerce, and also kind of constituencies in terms of, how to adapt for future conditions and how to kind of prosper, given the doom and gloom that we could be facing or are facing.
I have, in terms of community engagement, I've been involved in a number of parallel flood analyses. This is the DEPs Eddie was talking about, coastal resiliency grants that are given out. And initially, we would notice these meetings to try to outreach, and then really nobody shows up. And certainly the diversity is zero. So we're working with Martin County, and we've taken a different approach where we identify the community leaders of all walks of life, and then invite them, communicate directly with them to get them engaged in the process, instead of just waiting to see who would show up. And it turned out, we sent out a letter, we probably had 50, this would be everything. Real estate, tourist development, business, churches, you name it. And the response was amazing in terms of the number of people that said they wanted to get involved in this. And this is all to do with Resilient Martin. So one of the things, the successes I think that we've learned, and this needs to be expanded, is, and how we try to do community engagement to ensure an inclusive and diverse voice is, I think this is a new tool to do that. It worked. And, I've been doing these things for 4 or 5 years, and, we'd have these meetings, have the maps out, where is it flooded? There's like 4 people in the room, and, they all look like me. So we tried that and it worked, and that I think is a lesson learned in terms of this time of inclusion and diversity, a way that we could all learn from and maybe adapt when we try to generate community input and a community of people that represent the community that we live in.
Any other comments from the panel on this?
I just want to say, I don't really have like specific sort of local examples of successes, but for me, I think it's a baby step, and it's in the right direction, working with the federal government. I think the fact that FEMA reached out to academics, for instance, to improve the community rating system program is something that I think is a really good step in the right direction. And they acknowledge the fact that they don't know it all and they're willing to learn. And I think that's something that we've not seen before. So for me, it's a good step in the right direction.
I would echo that, Dr. Sadiq. In some of my work with disaster recovery, we have found this lack of capacity to be a big, big problem. And it's only been in the recent 3 or 4 years that the federal government has been willing to hear what academics have to say, because it's only been in the past 10 years that we've had access to any kind of data at all from the emergency management realm in the federal government. So it is a small breath of fresh air that they're listening and recognizing that, perhaps all we need to do is give a little bit more technical assistance to these people that have not applied for a grant. Because all along they thought, they just didn't need the grant. No, they didn't have the time, the expertise, the manpower, all the other capacity things. So also, Eddie, this is really exciting to hear this, what was it? $270 million for local grants that's coming out from DEP.
Yeah, so just to tail end on some of that, we've also seeing these regional resilience entities being formed. These are kind of consortiums of local governments that work together with a nonprofit to advance their community's resilience. And we offer grants to them to provide that cross-jurisdictional assistance, or maybe it's even contracting services, like you mentioned, for the communities that just, they don't know about the grant opportunities. The city manager is the building inspector, is the public works director, you know, to provide that assistance to them. And we're seeing some really good stuff come out of that. We're open now for our next round of funding for planning grants, and we're getting a lot of questions from those entities, like, what are good projects? How can, you know, what can we do to help our communities? And so they're looking at a regional level too. And I think that's really, really important, because one thing that we did in year one was we asked everybody, who's done an assessment? Would you be willing to send your information to us? And, you know, if you guys would stop introducing yourselves, I would realize, you know, I'm not as smart as I thought I was with all these people in here, but so I appreciate that everybody's here. But we hired some data specialists and people that knew what they were doing with computers, and they looked at all this data and they said, we can't do anything with this. We've got, and the way I can describe it, we've got apples and pears and oranges and limes and key limes. It was like everybody's assessing their vulnerability different. They're using different models. They're using different inputs. And so and we thought we could hire this company to kind of figure out where those gaps are and tie it all together. And I think it turned out like we can't. It's just so bad. So getting at least a regional level consistency, you know, knowing that that foot of rise results in X, Y, Z in that area is the same as this other area, I think is going to be really important. The success, I guess, from our first round was 98 communities got funding for planning vulnerability assessments, identify their critical assets, run the models, use the future conditions, figure out what's vulnerable. We're open now for more. We're going to have $20 million for that. It was $20 million last year. We had the 270. We got $400 million from coronavirus. So there's another list of projects out there that's $404 million that we're getting grant agreements in place now for. So like I mentioned before, significant investment in Florida's future, and really exciting stuff to be a part of. But it's those assessments that I think we really need to start looking at. We need to get buy-in that that's part of resilience. I think that's also important to point out is, you know, you might talk to 4 different people and they all have a different idea of what resilience is, and I'm not saying I'm the authority on what resilience is, trust me. But, you know, the way I think of it is it's not just ability to bounce back. You know, you hear a lot of like, you press down and how fast does it, you know, get back up to full shape. I think resilience is also the ability to plan, the ability to adapt, the resources that you're putting into minimizing that event, or even avoiding, you know, damages or losses because of something that you've done now. We always talk about, you know, you don't do a disaster plan after the disaster, you try to do it before the disaster, right? I was in emergency management for a couple years, and I worked in the NFIP office for Florida, and I understand the community radio system struggles with local communities. But I think, you know, coming to what is resilience, you know, coming to an agreement, what do we all think? And that includes planning, adaptation. How exposed are you? How sensitive are you? You know, those are 2 different things. Is your building potentially at risk of flooding? And if it floods, how bad is it? You know, if the first floor of the hospital is a parking lot, then maybe it's not as vulnerable to 1 foot of flooding as a clinic that's built on grade, right? So those are different sensitivities. So I think having those conversations and discussions is important, coming to an agreement, what is resilience, and getting buy-in. I had a conversation with a community the other day. They didn't want our funding to do a vulnerability assessment using future conditions because, first of all, those were hypothetical scenarios. You know, NOAA's sea level rise data was hypothetical. You know, you're making me put this in my map, which is going to show my residents they're at more risk, and I don't want to show them that. And I'm like, are you listening to what you're saying? You know, like that's a real conversation. So it's really incredible, but we just want to do as much as we can to help advance the priorities of the local governments and the communities and better protecting their people for future changes.
So I need to apologize because I'm one of the people that creates the assessments that turn into a fruit punch that doesn't really taste so great. But we're working on it, and so I'm working with the East Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative, RRC. So we are making those strides. And I think the twist towards threat assessment and moving it towards impact assessment is really important, as you say. It doesn't matter if there's a Category 5 storm if there are not people and infrastructure and ecologies and fish and things there to be damaged, right? So we really need to think about what are the impacts and who and what is being impacted and how are they feeling those impacts. We have a comment back here and then one over here.
Hey, Eddie, this is a follow-up. So has DEP, in this process of supplying the planning grants for these communities, have you evaluated who has received the funding and determined what communities are most vulnerable? Know about these opportunities, and are you thinking about targeting communities who have been historically left out of consideration and may not even know about that? I'd be interested to hear if you're looking at the geographic distribution of those awards.
So definitely, yes, looking at geographic distribution. I can't say we've analyzed who's more vulnerable or not. We were lucky enough last year that every community that had applied for a vulnerability assessment got one. So that was really great that we didn't have to draw a line somewhere. We did have some applications for things that weren't vulnerability assessments that we weren't able to fund because of just the number of applications that we got. But we made it a point that our programmatic goal was to get every community in Florida an assessment. So I do have a list of the communities that have one and don't have one, a list of who got funding, and then of course I'll be able to add to that list in the coming months through this round of applications. I do have a draft email. I was a little corny about it. I did an Uncle Sam, like Resilient Florida wants you kind of thing, that we were going to target those communities that didn't apply for funding, maybe don't know about the funding. I think my Uncle Sam thing is getting scrapped, but you know, I thought it was funny. But so yes, we are doing that. We've talked with a lot of the regional groups about providing this service to their communities. We even had a county, I think I can say, yeah, Dixie County. They're a really great example of, they were awarded funds last year, and they said, you know, we've got the surrounding counties here, you know, they don't necessarily have the relationships and the ability that we have, and we're working with the district, and we'd really like to be able to do assessments for those neighbors of ours, you know, different counties. Can we do that? Is that possible? You know, so even the counties are standing up and saying, we need to help people around us and offering to, how can we get to that? So we're looking at ways that we can support that effort to multiply, you know, and again, that goes back to the regional effort. If they're all doing, you know, those 4 counties and they're using the same engineer and the same models and everything is all consistent, you know, that's even better for us too. So we're certainly encouraging those counties that have municipalities that don't have the capacity to take that on for them. And we understand if that results in a dollar figure that's a little bit higher, you know, great. You know, how much is it? What is it going to cost? How can we help you get there? So certainly.
Sorry, that question was, how do you define communities?
Cities and municipalities, like Chapter 125 and 166, you know, incorporated municipalities or counties. So not like census designated areas. And
Dex?
Thank you. Just actually on that topic of climate change and impacted disadvantaged communities, the Leroy Collins Institute did a study in 2022 on that very topic, pretty exhaustive study. And so I would commend everyone to, you can go to the website, Leroy Collins Institute, go to their homepage, go down to research, and you can find it there. It's a really excellent about two-year study on, impacted communities and the level of planning. And it's some good data and a good roadmap on that, relative to that. So I'm Dykes Everett. I'm on the Coastal Advisory Board here at UCF. And so mine is probably an impossible question, perhaps. But, with regard to resiliency, and I would maybe frame it like this. If I wanted to invest capital in this issue of climate change, right, where would I go to make the most impact? And the point of this is, is it life safety? Because on some level, right, we're talking in terms of resiliency, just how do we get people who've moved and built in places they shouldn't have out of harm's way when they suffer the consequences of having made a poor decision? And I mean that in the global sense, right? We've been building on the dune line in Florida in earnest for at least half a century, when we used to recognize that was a bad, dangerous place to be, and all we would build out there would be summer shacks, right? We changed that. We changed our whole economic model to facilitate that. So is that really what we're talking about in terms of resiliency? Or, as Dr. Parkinson said, well, we're never going to fix the CO2 issue. So should we just abandon that? And what about the habitat issue, right? It strikes me that the more money we have to spend on life safety resiliency, the less money we're going to have in an era of scarce resources, which, let's face it, we are always in an era of scarce resources. We make choices. The less money we may have to spend on habitat and habitat restoration, right, and Everglades restoration for habitat, all of those types of things. So that's my impossible question, right? If today I want to come in as an investor or a major nonprofit and move the needle in climate change resiliency, what do I do?
It's not a bad question. It's amazingly complex. I'll let Randy take a stab at it.
One of the issues that I've contemplated is the same idea, although I didn't couch it that way, is where do I put my money, but there's like 5 steps in adaptive management. Identify the risk, develop a plan, implement the plan, monitor its success, and redo it. And we're very good at planning up to this date. A lot of plans, but in terms of implementing elements of that have a significant difference and will change the trajectory in terms of risk of life and so forth, I don't even know of any. And so this takes 2 things. One is your money that you have, but it also takes the will of the residents of that area. And these adjustments that we're going to have to make are significant. And right now, people are not willing to make those. I mean, I go down through Miami. There's got to be 50 new super high-rise buildings going in down there and on the island, right? So, in terms of roadblocks, and I don't know how we get from our intent to do things right and our planning to actually making a difference, which takes, again, 2 things: a lot of money, which I don't even know where that money's coming from, and it's going to be a lot more than anybody's talked about today. And then you have to have the political will to make decisions, not after, well, hopefully, I mean, if anything, like was just mentioned, then these post-disaster redevelopment things have to have teeth. And now we're going to go back and build better. So to me, that's the fuzzy area. So it's really hard to answer your question there, because it's just not the money that's needed to do what you have, theoretically would like to do.
Ooh, I'm glad I don't have to try then. Thank you.
I would add to that, the concept of impact has been economically driven for so long. And we need to think about and figure out how to include qualitative impacts that are not connected to money. And the great example I had is in Beaufort, South Carolina. You have a hurricane that comes through and one $3 million home is destroyed and 20 $20,000 homes are destroyed. The loss models pick up the place with the one $3 million home as the most losses, right? So we cannot rely on economic models to be the sole answer for where the most impact is. There needs to be some other way of doing it. And that will help us to do more planning, but then invest in those places where perhaps a Rawlsian equity approach, where we're helping the people and entities and organisms that need it most rather than focusing on the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. I think, we have to start thinking about like the triple bottom line, like how this investment impacts kind of the social, the economic, and also the environmental. And I would say if you're going to put your investment somewhere, you want to maybe create some synergy, right? You want to keep people safe, you want to improve the habitat, and you want to build resiliency for the future. And I think we can't adapt our way out of this problem. If you look at the sea level rise curve, it increases, the farther out you get. And we're always going to be chasing investment in infrastructure for a problem that, the root cause is emissions. And so I think looking at where you invest those dollars in communities that are also hoping to take advantage of addressing some, past injustices in terms of frontline communities, and also kind of expanding on, are there places where the local communities and partners are also addressing kind of the root cause, which is emissions, whether that's pledging to be carbon neutral by 2050 or implementing, building efficiency, electrifying their fleet, incentivizing maybe transit-oriented development in areas that are outside of our vulnerable areas along the coast. I think you're right. I think you have to start thinking not just in terms of, well, my tax base is this, we're going to protect the waterfront at all costs. I think the community, a coastal community, is more than just its luxury, high value tax base along the waterfront. And don't get me wrong, that's part of how our local governments and system funds itself. But, that's just one aspect of the community, right? There's many more aspects of the community that really need to go into that decision-making process. And I think a good example of that is when the Back Bay study for Biscayne Bay, the Army Corps kind of looked at, gray infrastructure, dividing communities, 20-foot walls going through many neighborhoods, and what that meant for you if you lived on one side of the wall or the other, and really only looked at the economics of a massive engineering infrastructure problem. And I think that's definitely not the way that we move forward, right? You have to kind of look at all of the other things that go into making a resilient community, not just protecting from a catastrophic event, but also making sure that, there's resources available and everything that makes a community vibrant, right, and diverse, whether that's housing or having a place to connect with other like-minded people and share resources and information. And I think there is a lot of that going on. We've seen, I don't know if FEMA is sponsoring, but like these resilience hubs where you can kind of, members of the community can come in there and, charge their phones, get updates on, the weather or what's going on, and share information. I think coming together rather than like separating and dividing and building walls, I think is where you want to invest. So that's a an incomplete answer to a very difficult problem, something that I think that we're still trying to solve. But every community is different, and they all have, they all prioritize what's important for their community. And yeah.
Well, certainly the lower Florida Keys has got to be where you would look to see how the community is, I mean, that is the front line. And I know we've got, and I've sort of been watching the steps that they're taking and the challenges that they're facing as they try to adapt this, principally to sea level rise and storm surge. But I think, there's the test tube, if it can be, it's just to how this will work out, because they are at risk, the greatest amount of risk of anybody along the Florida coast, to my knowledge, right now, that it's populated like that. And just looking at how that's evolved over time, I think is an interesting lesson. And it hasn't been smooth at all, even though it's eminent. The roads are going to be underwater and so on and so forth. It's eminent, and they're already having problems, and yet the progress being made towards becoming more resilient has been slow.
All right, with just the few minutes we have left, are there other, oh, Nan has, did Paul, you had your hand up? All right, Paul. Then Nan.
Hi, Paul Skinner. I live on a barrier island where you're not supposed to build a house. Which counties have been most successful in conversion of septic to sewer? Whoever on the panel is, because we're not doing very well with that in Volusia County right now.
Well, so that is true. Volusia County's been slow to roll on a lot of things that are dealing with resilience, and even with regards to the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. And I can't speak for the state, but all the counties along the Indian River Lagoon have major programs. I think Martin County is just, they've got so many projects where they're getting these communities off of septic. I went online, there's a report every year that the National Estuary Program does for Indian River Lagoon, and they have a summary of all of the projects, and usually about the amount of money that has been invested, and it's pretty impressive. Volusia is coming along, but has historically been slower because of the politics of climate change, but it's doing a lot better than it was. So in my little window, and these threats that I outlined at the beginning about increased pollutant loadings, it's not just the Indian River Lagoon. I have a paper coming out where I looked at all of the national estuary programs, and every one of them, there's like 27, faces the same issues when it comes to sea level rise and climate change. Just all of this infrastructure that basically passes human waste is not going to be in a situation for which it was designed for. So these issues are going to have to be resolved. And we do see, Tampa Bay, I think, is a success story on water quality restoration and dealing with nutrient pollution. So there's a success. Sarasota Bay, I think, is working on that. There's a plan for the Indian River Lagoon. We'll see how quickly that, again, like I said earlier, how quickly that comes online and at what scale to be successful. But there have been a number of estuaries in the state of Florida whose water quality has been restored and are more climate resilient today than there was 10 years ago. So again, we're getting there. And as I just mentioned, the pace and scale is what I'm concerned about. Is can we get this moving at the scale and complete these projects before it just gets terribly worse?
I don't know that we answered your question, Paul, but maybe we'll circle back with you.
Well, I threw Volusia County under the bus.
Martin County's number one?
Brevard County has a $500,000 tourist The property owner ad valorem tax, people voted, generated about $500 million. And they're converting, they've identified all the septic tanks, they prioritized them by proximity and age to the lagoon, and they're constructing and putting these things online. There's a lot of activity going on when it comes to getting rid of septic along the east central, certainly east central Florida coast, a lot. And I hope that clarifies that a little bit.
We also funded some projects in Miami-Dade. I can only speak for the projects that came into our program. OSTDS, probably a different section, and DEP maybe has that information. But I know Miami-Dade, somewhere between 200 and 400 homes were getting converted in this round.
Thank you. And the last question or comment, Nan?
Counteract Dr. Doom here, but picking up on Joe and Dykes, what you were asking about, there's something new that was just premiered at NASDAQ a couple of months ago. The International Well Building Institute has been around for 10 years. It serves over 109 countries, and their focus has always been on how health mirrors in the built environment. So they've got 50% medical information. They take a building and look at as if it were a human being, how it breathes, how it hears, and all of that. So they've come up with the 12 competencies measuring health and well-being for human and social capital as a feature in investment and risk management. And that's really a timely intersection of these things, because it comes down, if your home is damaged by water, you could face mold as well as all kinds of other issues. So when we look at what people respond to is their personal impact, and I think this is a new space in these competencies. They did it because they didn't feel that the ESGs and the CSRs and the UN all really emphasized health enough, and that's kind of their bottom line. So this is a whole new set of criteria to work into our decision-making process.
Thanks, Nan. I would like just to take this chance before closing out this session to say I've failed you as an MC. There was another group of people that I should have recognized. I've had it on this paper here. These are the folks on our Coastal Board of Directors, and our majority of our board is here. So if you would please stand really quickly as I say your names. George McKay in the back of the room. George. Dykes Everett next to George. Nan Summers here. And Scott Saunders over in the right side of the room. These folks have given us lots of food for thought that are almost always like Dykes' impossible question every time that we meet. But it really drives us to start thinking about these things more holistically and think bigger picture. And I would like to then thank my panel for sticking it out here and providing us such great discussion points. And we will go to a 30-minute break and then be back here for our second panel. Thanks. Sergio.
Hey, good afternoon. So again, my name is Sergio Alvarez, and I am with the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. My background is in economics, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the four panelists, the thought leaders in ecotourism here in the state of Florida. So the way that I would like to, to do this is, in essence, I'm gonna read or give an introduction of the speaker. Then the panelists can come up here and give a short introduction or a presentation. And then when everybody's seated, then we'll have our sort of question and answer session. So to begin with, I would like to invite Dave Randall. Dave holds a BA from California Lutheran University, a master's in divinity from the Iliff School of Theology, and a doctorate in spiritual disciplines, wellness, and environmental concerns from the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. He currently serves as president and CEO of the Whale Center, a member of the United Nations Environment Program Major Stakeholders Group, UNWTO affiliate, and host of the Blue Community Sustainable Tourism Observatory, an organization with special consultative status at the United Nations. Dave is a certified practitioner in project management for sustainable development and is the managing director of the Blue Community Consortium. He serves on the board of directors for the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and the board of directors for the Florida Society of Ethical Ecotourism. Dave, please come up.
Thank you, Sergio. We have an awkward logistical situation with our slides not here, so I'm going to walk around a little bit, and hopefully this will work well. And yeah, it looks like it's going great. Really excited to be here. The Blue Community was one of the first organizations to join as an affiliate with the UCF Coastal, and so we've been involved with UCF Coastal from the very beginning and keep growing our partnerships. I'm really happy to be here with that. The Blue Community was founded through a program through the International Ocean Institute. And one of the first things we did, we wanted to focus on coastal resiliency, ironically. And we spent 2 weeks in Geneva with the UN International Strategies for Disaster Reduction team. And we learned a lot of techniques and strategies and how the 154 countries of the world came to some consensus on how to approach those issues. But the director said, you know, if there's one takeaway that he wanted us to go back home with, it didn't matter whether we were talking about prevention, mitigation, or recovery. The answer was the same: sustainability. The more sustainable you were, the better you were going to do in any of those 3 areas. And so we then began working with the Walt Disney Animal Science Environment team to develop strategies that we could use here with our coastal areas and also in the Caribbean region. And we really got excited about the metaphor of what Disney World was supposed to be. Epcot was supposed to be a city. This is actually a drawing of what the city was supposed to look like, with a huge 30-story hotel in the center and conference centers. And the idea would people would come around and there'd be research projects going on. There would be famous streets of the world. And the Animal Science Environment team has 650 scientists working on 105 countries on sustainability projects all over the world. So we thought we could maybe take some of those best practices and then apply them as ways to carry out this kind of vision that Epcot had. So with a little help from Tinkerbell and some pixie dust, we started off on our way. And we really got a break when Disney partnered with Pierre Vacances, a developer in France known for preserving biodiversity and forests, to create the ecotourism resort called Villages Nature. And I went out to visit this before it was even open, and they had already won an award as the most sustainable tourism resort in the world. And that's kind of hard to do usually when you're not even open yet to win that kind of an award. But they did, because UNEP decided that with their plan that was well documented how it was going to be implemented, there was nothing else in the world that came close to it. And so some of the features, they do all of their energy through solar and geothermal. They have zero waste, meaning zero waste to landfill, through recycling and composting. Sustainable transportation system where there's no cars in the village, and their electric shuttles are powered by solar energy. Sustainable water, they actually made a commitment in the development that they would never take any water from the aquifer unless it was necessary for an emergency like a fire or something like that. Otherwise, they would never take anything from the aquifer. And they agreed, no matter what the growing season, to have a minimum of 28% of their food from sustainable resources. They use local sustainable materials. They actually have individual species protection plans for 72 species in the area and redesign the village to have quarters for wildlife so they would not disturb wildlife habitat. And then they focus on local cultural heritage tours and local partnerships and fair trade. And the theme is quality of life and well-being. And this was the grand opening, which they invited me to come to after I wrote an article in the Huffington Post about it. And at this meeting, we met the people that did the framework for how they created this resort, a group called One Planet Living. And the two of us decided we wanted to work together, and we actually created pilots in Anna Maria Island here in Florida and also New Smyrna Beach that we've actually implemented. So I want to share a little bit about that. And I want to share also, we took a team of 9 people to COP26 in Glasgow last fall. Several people from Orlando, including Chris Castro for representing the city. He was on our team. Clayton Ferrara with ideas for us. Jared Myers from First Climate Bank and so forth. So Orlando is well represented on our team from that standpoint. But I think it's important when we talk about promoting our ideas of sustainability to let you know how we define it. We do not look at sustainability with the model that we call the political model, where they try to balance social economic interests, environmental interests, and cultural interests. And somehow that balance they call sustainability. I actually was the first environmental coordinator of any county commission in the United States, Pitkin County, Colorado. And we started, it's a ski area, Aspen, Snowmass area, if you've ever been in that area. And we realized right away that if we did not put the environment as the foundation for sustainability, we had nothing. Without snow, there is nothing it's going to make any difference, no matter how many great cultural programs we had with the Aspen Institute or how many other programs we had economically, which we had great programs with housing and things that other communities didn't have as well. None of that would matter if we didn't have the biosphere at the foundation. So you need a healthy environment to create a healthy society, which then you can have a healthy economy. So we think this model is important, and it actually fits very well with the UN Sustainable Development Goals that are structured that way as well. Our own model of the Blue Community, we started with the 4 pillars of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, and we looked around there, how do we create sustainable social structures, and we used the strategies that we created with the Walt Disney Company to create just and sustainable economic development and a safe space for community, but all within the limitation of the science of the 9 planetary boundaries. We know that climate change in the news is an important issue, but maybe what we don't know is science is telling us there's 8 other issues that can be tipping points as well. And so we need to pay attention to all 9 of these planetary boundaries. So some of the major components we've created are assessments. We have a new app that destinations and communities can assess themselves with these frameworks, training and development programs. UCF Rosen College of Hospitality has created a new certificate program offered globally to train people in using this system. We have blockchain integration that we can verify things at a lower cost and virtual auditing. And we have, through One Planet Living, our partner, a process for online sustainability planning. And the assessments include all of the GSDC criteria, all of the UNWTO sustainable tourism metrics, all of the One Planet Living principles, all of the Blue Community strategies, and all rooted in the science of the 9 planetary boundaries. These are the 10 principles that were used to create the Villages Nature project. They've been tested not only in Villages Nature, which is really their flagship project, but in places all over in the world, the low-income projects in Africa, projects all over North America, South America, Europe, in hotels, restaurants, attractions, resorts, and communities with tremendous success. And these are the 12 strategies we co-developed with the Walt Disney Animal Science and Environment team that we've shared around the world as well. Particular emphasis in our policy section of the assessment is how the destination or community is developing policies for each of these 9 planetary boundaries. So I want to share some of the best practices that we shared at COP26 and we're continuing to work on, that we hope to bring back even stronger in COP27, to just give you a flavor of some of the things that we're doing to try to create resiliency in coastal communities. Looking at some of the major areas any community needs to focus on: food, buildings, energy, transportation, and wellness or health. The Childs group, Ed Childs was part of our team too. I don't know if any of you know Ed Childs, but he's got a number of projects going, including the All Clams on Deck, sustainable seafood, organic farming, composting, and solar energy. The All Clams on Deck project, they're actually creating aquaculture with clams that go into 3 waterfront restaurants that Ed has, and then the shells are taken to the farm and used to help fertilizer and recycled into building materials. So that's been a great thing. And it actually brings a fresh flavored local seafood. It takes pressure off seafood imports. It improves sustainability of fisheries, and it creates new jobs for the local community. So it's a win-win-win-win kind of project. In terms of sustainable seafood, all 3 of the restaurants there serve nothing but sustainable seafood, including mullet, copia, middle neck clams, shrimp, calamari, crab are some of the major examples. But basically, sustainability means being able to share something for future generations. And we're already overfishing each year 40% more than our oceans can sustain. So the more we create sustainable alternatives, the more we build resiliency and mitigate those issues. In terms of the farm, they provide the food for the restaurants, fresh farm to fork dining experience, growing 100% certified organic produce sold also at the farm to the local community. And Ed is actually the son of the former Florida governor and U.S. Senator Lawton Childs. So you might think this is a big political program, but it's actually a program really based in science, not politics. And agriculture and aquaculture, sustainable, organic, wild, cultivated, field to fork, as he says, or Gulf to grill, or pasture to plate are all of the things that they're bringing. And the restaurants then feature Florida local dishes that people can enjoy. And then everything that goes into the restaurant is, in terms of food waste, is taken back to the farm for composting. And so it's a circle that way. This is a view of the farm here. One of the exciting things that we have proposed, we hope to implement this year at the farm, is to convert it to 99% solar. We'll get to 100% maybe the year after, but we're going to start with 99% solar, which will save over $10,000 in utility bill cost. We'll have battery storage for excess solar. What happens is solar is more intense today, has more energy than we need. We'll use that to divert in the batteries, and the batteries can run the coolers at night to keep the food fresh. And then we have a generator if the battery goes dead. And then biodigester, which will process the food, and water is converted into the fertilizer, waste is converted into fertilizer, and also biogas. And the biogas then runs the generator. So in summary, solar energy is used to power the farm to produce the food. Excess energy is generated by the solar panels in the day, stored in the battery to power the coolers at night. And if the battery power is depleted, a generator kicks on to produce the energy costs of the coolers. The food is then grown at the farm, sent to the restaurants, and sold to the general public. The food waste from the restaurants returned to the farm, put it in the biodigester, and the biodigester produces the fertilizer to grow more food and provide energy to power the generator if needed to complete the circle. So we're really excited about this agriculture model. My time's up, almost. I'll just end real quickly, but I just want to say, building-wise, we have the technology now to build for hurricanes up to 300 mile an hour. This is a resort that actually was hit by Hurricane Keith. These are some models that we've actually developed here in Florida, in St. Petersburg and Key West. Our partner, West Bay Energy, is available if you want help to do that. And the last thing I'll end with is the Aptera. We're working with Aptera Motors to bring a manufacturing plant here to Orlando. And it's going to be the first solar, no-charge electric vehicle with a battery range of up to 1,000 miles. And it provides resilience against high gas prices, rental car prices, and fuel shortages and natural disasters and other situations.
We live in a world obsessed with expansion and exploration, endlessly searching for answers out there. But what if the answer isn't just in the stars? What if infinite possibilities are the ones we've yet to think of? What if the same innovation that helps us out there can also help us here on Earth? Our responsibility is here, to this planet, to create a better tomorrow for future generations. As the world's first ever charged solar electric vehicle, Aptera offers a 1,000-mile range with over 40 miles a day of free solar charging. If 1 out of every 20 vehicles on the road were replaced with an Aptera, Americans would save 18 million gallons of gasoline every day, or 6 billion gallons per year. Each Aptera owner can reduce their carbon footprint by over 14,000 pounds of CO2 per year. That's what 884 25-year-old pine trees can absorb in a year. Imagine a world where technology gives more than it takes. Imagine beyond the stars.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. So next, I would like to invite Peter Kranis. Peter grew up in Melbourne, Florida, attending and graduating with honors from Ugali High School and Brevard Community College with an AA in journalism. He went on to the University of Central Florida and received a BA with honors and an MA in communications. He was also an adjunct professor at UCF for 26 years. His career began with handling advertising, public relations, and marketing at Church Street's station, Sprint Telecom, SunTrust Banks, and global bank software firm Kirchmann Corporation. He then determined that tourism was his passion and became director of marketing for the AAA national office, followed by a 16-year tenure at Visit Orlando, where he was the vice president of global consumer marketing and managed 40 staff members, a $25 million marketing budget, and attraction ticket sales of $14 million. Then he became the head of sales and marketing at the Orlando Eye, or that big wheel, the 400-foot tall observation wheel in the heart of the International Drive District. He has been executive director of the Space Coast Office of Tourism since March 2019, managing a staff of 16 and a $40 million budget. His passion is marketing, tourism, the beach, and Brevard County, where he has lived for the last 14 out of 15 years. Peter, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Sergio. I appreciate it. First of all, thanks for breaking the mold and being able to stand up here, because otherwise it's a little hard to see around the corner to see the slides. I'm going to take you through something. First of all, that's a really tough presentation to follow, so I'm a little nervous now. I don't know if I have anything quite that exciting, but I was looking around the room earlier and talking to a lot of people, and I realized I'm the least science-y person here. I'm the communications marketing guy who got into tourism, And I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do, but I've learned a lot from a lot of scientists who know a lot about the Indian River Lagoon and other things that we have in Brevard County. So talk a little bit about where tourism touches science and nature and things that we need to really be focused on today and into the future. And you know, the way I look at it, I need to understand your world and you kind of need to understand mine so we can work together, because I think marketers and tourism people can really bring a lot to the table in this space in terms of making things happen. So hopefully this will be a little bit educational for you as well as I'm learning from you guys. First of all, a little bit about economics in our world. Tourism in Brevard County, we're a small county, 600,000 people. And I think 600,000 people move to Orlando every day, right? Something like that. We're not a big county in terms of population, but we generate a lot in terms of the space industry, and then tourism generates $2.25 billion in economic impact, visitor spending of nearly $2 billion, 28,000 jobs. We're the 4th largest employer. And you know, when you look at where revenue comes from, so a lot of municipalities and counties count dollars because that's how they operate. 30% of the sales tax is paid for by tourists, 20% of the gas tax. We get 2.3 million unique passengers through Port Canaveral, which is the 2nd largest cruise port in the world. And then look at the state of Florida. This was the most recent study I was able to find of economic impact across the state of tourism. 96.5, almost $100 billion in economic impact and 1.6 million jobs. And then you know, for the folks in Brevard County, I always like to say, if it weren't for us, you'd be paying more in taxes. So it's kind of my comments. But a little bit about our budget. You know, our budget probably pales in comparison to like Orange County or Miami or Tampa, but it's been growing incredibly. And you can see, you know, back in 2010, 2011, when the shuttle program was kind of declining, all of a sudden there was a bigger focus on tourism, and look what happened with tourism dollars. They just began to explode exponentially. So we climbed up to 16 million in 19, and then of course COVID kind of took the wind out of the sails a little bit that year. But then in 21, we were right back, and we're probably going to actually break that. That's a budget number of 17.5 million. We're probably going to blow through that, and then next year my budget's 19 million, but we'll probably blow through that again with everything that it looks like we're doing. So we're heading in the right direction that way. And what I was going to say, what's important about this is, out of these dollars, a lot of dollars are devoted to grants and programs that are really impactful of either ecotourism or the Indian River Lagoon or things like that. So we have a $1 million grant program for the Indian River Lagoon for projects there. We have, I just finished, or am finishing, a $4 million project at a local park, Lori Wilson Park in Cocoa Beach. We replaced all of the boardwalks, all the crossovers, new bathrooms, everything's eco-friendly. We have a maritime hammock that we've been reconstructing the boardwalk within that, and getting some of the invasives out of there, and doing some new planting. So, you know, that's money that's going, that park in itself, about 2 million visitors a year, and 80% of those visitors are from outside the county, and 20% are from inside the county. So it benefits both tourists and residents alike. And then we have our beach renourishment programs, which I want to say we're the only county in the state that we're 100% fund our beach renourishment out of tourist development tax, and then dollars that are leveraged from that. So we work with the Army Corps of Engineers, state of Florida, and all of our beaches are renourished. About every 4 years they do projects. So this year we've got about a $7 million project going on. That's going to run what we call our mid-reach, which runs from south of Patrick Space Force Base down to almost Indy Atlantic. So it's a pretty big stretch, and that's a huge project to put more sand on the beach. And what we're seeing is by doing that and doing more planting, we get more sea turtles, we get more wildlife. So these projects are not just for tourists to lay on the beach. It actually helps with the ecology and the ecosystem. A little bit, this is just interesting. We did some research on how do people perceive us, and I want to show a little. I'm going to get a little bit into marketing, not too much, but I just wanted to kind of so you can see how we think and how ecotourism is part of it, because really we don't think there's any tourism without ecotourism. But people know us for Kennedy Space Center and the space program. Obviously, beautiful beaches are something we're known on, and when they rate us 84% of the top 2 box. So on a five-point scale, they rate us 4 or 5. Natural beauty and clean area, 76% rate us in the top 2 box, and about a third of the people participate in some kind of outdoor activity. And then, of course, there's a lot of other things they say about us, like fun and enjoyable, relaxing and peaceful, not too crowded, and family friendly. And of course, we're close to Orlando, which helps with a lot of travel that we get from Orlando, from people that are coming for theme parks but need a break, so they come over to visit us. This was something we were voted among the best in the world in 2021, and one of the things this was Nat Geo, so this was a global rating. So we were in there with U.S. destinations, but there were also global destinations in this. And one of the things they said about us was regarding the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, which is in our area, is that they talked about the manatees and of course the waters around the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, which surround the Space Center, which is a very unique ecosystem. If you've never been over there to kayak with the manatees or to come at night and see bioluminescence, we're one of the few places in North America where you can see bioluminescence right there. So it's a pretty cool experience. Just a little bit, this was just some of the branding that we did. We tried to tie in the municipalities into the idea of Space Coast, because a lot of people felt there was a little bit of a disconnect between where's Cocoa Beach, where's the Space Coast. Well, Cocoa Beach is on the Space Coast, and Melbourne's on the Space Coast, and Titusville. So these are some of our ways of explaining that. And then when we got into the actual advertising, what the consumers were saying is, it's great to see beautiful beach imagery and outdoor imagery, but tell us why we should come to your location. So we tried to find some uniquenesses, which obviously space and space-related things, launches and things like that are a big part of that. So we created this campaign that had a lot of beautiful visuals, a lot of which are ecotourism type of visuals, but there's always sort of a rocket or some kind of space element in there, because that is something that makes us so unique. And with 40 or 50 launches this year, I mean, there's pretty much any given week you can come over and see a launch. So that's something that we are promoting pretty heavily. Also, we're promoting the zoo very heavily. It's the only zoo in North America where you can kayak past giraffes. If you've never done that, that's a pretty cool experience. The zoo is ranked pretty consistently in the top 10 zoos in the country by USA Today, and they're actually going for a top 5 rating, I think, this year. So they've really done a very good job of building a zoo that's kind of takes advantage of the ecosystem that it's in, and tries to build within the nature and everything that they have there. Let's see if I can go back. Yeah, just a couple of other little ads there. There's a rocket ship over the water, and that's a board in Orlando somewhere with the kayak. But we like to say we're the only beach that doubles as a launch pad. So that's one of our little slogans that I enjoy throwing out in presentations. And there that is, right there. And then there's just some other ads. You can see surfers and turtles. You know, we again, in terms of ecotourism, we are the largest location in the Western Hemisphere for turtle nesting. We have the Archie Carr National Refuge along the down Melbourne Beach and south of there down to Sebastian, that little stretch there. It's amazing, all the turtle nesting that goes on. So, you know, we're trying to support and promote and try to, you know, show things that obviously people are interested in. Let's see if this plays. I don't know if it will. If not, we'll skip past it. Oh, let's see. You might need to hit, there you go. So, you know, it's interesting. It's truly a juxtaposition of tourism, space, and the technology that goes with space, and then all the science that goes with ecotourism. So we have it sort of all in one place. So it's kind of cool. And then just a little bit for the future, we're in a very high growth mode right now. We've added about 1,500 hotel rooms over the last couple of years, and we're, then my last slide, by the way, Sergio. But looking at about 2,000 more rooms coming. Port Canaveral, by the end of the year, will be hopefully the #1 cruise port in the world, going ahead of Miami with 13 ships. We've got now new international service, direct service from the UK with TUI flying in from about 7 or 8 different markets in the UK. Lots of new airlines, of course, launches. We're the #1 launch location in the world. We're more launches than China, more launches than Russia, and certainly more launches than any other domestic city. So when we plan to keep that position as we are looking to grow to over 100 launches a year and up from that. We're projecting, of course, 22, we're projecting will be much better than 21, which was our best year ever. More than 20 million in tax collections, which of course a lot of that funds get recycled into the community through those projects I mentioned. And then we've got a lot of new projects coming down the road. And then the last slide, or the last bullet on the last slide, is probably the most important, and it's not stated well for this audience, but the way I would state it is, as we grow, as we look to the future, what we want to make sure we're doing is that we're marketing to people that are the type of people that are well-educated, affluent, and understand the idea of sustainability and want to work towards the, zero footprint, if you will. So, we say it as, we want to attract higher income tourists who will stay longer and spend more. But what it really means is we want to attract the type of people that will respect the destination, respect what we have, and are, interested in learning about all the ecotourism activities that we have and want to participate even, maybe do beach cleanups or be part of some of the zoo projects that they have. So, it's a different way of looking at it, but it's from a long-term perspective. We have to protect the assets that we have, and we want to make sure they're here for future generations. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next up, I would like to invite Scott Saunders to give an introduction. Scott is a 4th-generation Key West native who continues to believe that Key West is a natural paradise. He earned an accounting degree from UCF and founded Saunders & Company CPA in 1992. In 2008, he partnered with Chris Colpin to create Saunders & Colpin PL. In 2004, Scott purchased one of his client companies, Fury Water Adventures, and has grown it to the largest water adventure company in the state of Florida, with a track record for innovative tours and excellent customer service in Key West. Scott's leadership at Fury has created a company with a focus on conserving the beauty of Florida's coastal waterways and communities. He has opened the door for the UCF National Center for Integrated Coastal Research to partner with the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Scott and his wife, Tammy, are avid UCF supporters and have established the Saunders Family Endowed Scholarship and have made gifts to the UCF College of Business Administration and UCF Coastal. Scott, will you join us for a few brief remarks?
I'm going to be very boring compared to the two speakers I'm following. I don't have slides, data, but what I can talk to you about is what is a very small company. It started as a small company. I acquired a catamaran and 12 employees back in 2004 from a client of mine who didn't see the potential to do some really cool things in Key West on the water. So we started with a catamaran and 12 people back in 2004, but we had a vision to do a lot more than that. We thought that we could create something for everyone who wanted to endeavor on the water. Some of those activities are more high adventure, such as parasail and jet ski and our water park in the Gulf of Mexico. And along the way, we saw a different customer emerge, and that would be more of an nature-based clientele that continues to emerge as a bigger customer every year. Those customers we see enjoy our Dolphin Watch. We have a tour called the Island Adventure that goes 13 miles west of Key West into the shallows, through mangroves and these type of things, and kayaking, paddleboard. It's very laid back, and those are smaller boutique tours done on smaller vessels than the traditional vessels where we reef snorkel and do sunset sails, which are larger catamarans. And we have a water park that we talked about. But aside from the growth of the company, and we started as 12 employees and one catamaran, we're 16 vessels, passenger vessels now, and close to 200 employees. The success of Fury hasn't been its growth. Even though that's for economic purposes in our island, that's well done. The success of Fury has been its people, and the things that we do as a people. Fury's been able to attract a population of employment that size in Key West because of the culture we created and what we find as collectively that's important. I'm 4 generations from Key West, but our captains and crew are as equally passionate about that island as I am. Every one of our captains, every one of our crew is as passionate as I am about home, which is Key West, and our coral reefs. That is a culture among us that it feeds itself because there is this sense of specialness about the environment within which we work, in which we live. And that attracts others that are like us in the company. And we share that every day in our experience with our customers, that we get a chance to be out on the water, sharing this precious resource that is special in ways that all of you know. So it is in that culture of people that find this as precious as I do, that conveys itself to the customer, that experience, that special, when we educate. But it's created something very special among our people that we get to do this every day. Our captains are as passionate as, stopping the boat with 50 people on it, picking up a plastic bag off the water. We were involved in a lot of turtle rescue, and I was talking to Sarah Fangman, our superintendent. We had Sarah knew. We saved a baby pup dolphin recently that made some headline news. But we're really passionate as a company. And if Fury has a success, it's not the brand or its vessels, the marketing. It is a group of people that come together every day to provide exceptional tours in an environment that's precious. And we share that. And so we're 18 years into that now. And So where do we go from here? Well, we continue to do the things we do as a company. But in my time right now, I think we're hitting a sweet spot because we have established a great company with a great brand, with great vessels, and an incredible culture. So where do we go from here? Well, the next phase for us is to continue doing those things, but give back. We've always had a culture of giving back, and we want to make sure that the resource within which you work every day is one that we leave better than when we started. Or how can we be part of a solution to that environment that struggles with stress that we know, and there are lots of stresses we know. We talk about weather, we talk about climate change. These things are all impacting our reefs. But so we wanted now, we've always made restoration, beach cleanups a part of our DNA. Our next phase will be doing more of that work, and we have been blessed as a community with a superintendent who you'll hear speak next behind me. Sarah Fangman, who has blazed the path for good things to happen. We have a project that Sarah will talk about, the 7 iconic reefs. I think you'll probably talk a little bit about that. That's unbelievable. This is what we have wanted for so long, is to have an environment that allows us to be part of a solution, that allows us to restore, that allows us to do things that help that resource that desperately needs it. So as a company, where our company wants to head is continue to do the things it does, but more than anything, be a part of restoration, be a part of, coral disease. How can we educate? Being a part of Coastal is a huge success for me because I get to work with, very smart people that Fury can be part of that group helping solve these problems. And we have a climate with Sarah now that allows us to do that. So I don't have a lot of fancy graphs, and I surely don't have Tinkerbell up here flying around the screen either. But I will say that, Fury is a lucky company because it's just been something that, for me to watch, to get a group of people together every day that's so equally passionate about our reefs, to go do the things we do every day, to work with Sarah, to work with UCF, that's been a huge success. And it's, for me now, as we move into the future, to be a part of restoration, be a part of some of the most important things that we know we need. And Sarah has set the groundwork and the path for us to do that with her teams, with Coastal, with FIU. I think we were talking with them at a project as well. So my presentation is less than 10 minutes. I'm certainly looking forward to a little Q&A with you guys. I think I have a lot to talk about as it relates to Key West, our environment, resiliency, and so on and so forth. So that said, I'll be looking forward to talking to you all more.
Thank you. So finally, I would like to invite Sarah Fangman. Sarah is the superintendent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary and is responsible for leadership, vision, and strategic direction, overseeing a staff of more than 40 employees and affiliates. Sarah came to the Florida Keys in 2017 with 19 years of experience working for the National Marine Sanctuary System. Most recently, a superintendent of Grace Reef National Marine Sanctuary off the coast of Georgia from 2014 to 2017. She was also the program coordinator of the Southeast, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean region from 2005 to 2014, and served as the research coordinator for Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary in California from 1998 to 2005. Sarah, please join us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of all of this, and you are too kind, my friend. All right, so I am a marine resource manager. I protect a place in the ocean, and that is a place that intersects with a lot of tourism. So I'm gonna just sort of give a little bit of context for that, and then I look forward to more discussions about some of the challenges and the opportunities that we have in the Florida Keys as a case study. So, Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, 3,800 square miles surrounding the Florida Keys. Starts off of Miami, on the outside edge of Biscayne National Park, goes all the way down through the Keys on both sides, Oceanside and Bayside, all the way out to the Tortugas. Within that area, there are over 6,000 species that live within the sanctuary, and there are a variety of habitat types. I think most people, when they think of the Florida Keys, they think about our reefs. Of course, these are very dynamic, rich, biodiverse habitats. But we also have important habitats, including our mangroves. We have 1,700 islands in the Florida Keys, and along those shorelines, 1,800 miles of mangroves. That's a lot of mangroves. If you started driving in Key West, you'd get up to New England before you got 1,800 miles. You'd be looking at mangroves the whole way. It's a lot of mangrove. Very, very important habitat for coastal protection. I know this audience knows that, but also most of the recreational commercial fisheries in the Florida Keys, those fish spend part of their life in those mangroves. They're important nursery habitat. Another habitat I think doesn't get enough attention, but is still also very, very important that we protect, and that is seagrass communities. We have one of the largest seagrass communities in North America in the Florida Keys, 1.5 million acres. That's about the size of the state of Delaware. So another important habitat. Those are the natural resources we protect in the sanctuary. We also protect maritime heritage resources, shipwrecks. We know of about 800 natural or maritime heritage resources in the sanctuary, very, very rich maritime history. We think there's probably close to 2,000 shipwrecks in the sanctuary. And a lot of people really interested in those come to the Keys to dive and snorkel on them. Over 5 million people come to the Florida Keys every year to enjoy these natural and cultural resources. Some of them like to paddle in the mangroves. If you haven't paddled in the branches and the roots of a mangrove, you've got to put that on your list of things to do. It's magical. You can also go out in the backcountry and have a really solitary or, I guess not solitary, solitude. That's the word I'm looking for. Solitude, maybe with just a guide and your fishing pole. Do a little fly fishing. But if solitude is not your thing, you like a little adrenaline, we got that too in the Keys. People come to enjoy powerboat races. This is off of Key West. About 2.4 million people come to the Keys every year to enjoy recreational fishing. 1.4 million people come to the Florida Keys for snorkeling and diving. About that same 1.5 million people come to go boating. That's all numbers that are pre-COVID. What happened during COVID? Well, the Florida Keys, of course, offered beautiful tropical weather when people were stuck at home in Michigan during COVID. Wide open spaces, and the Monroe County Tourism Development Council really played on that. They advertised heavily that we offer, space, we offer warm weather, beautiful turquoise waters, and we saw lots of people coming down to the Keys, record numbers during COVID. That can be measured in a number of ways. The Key West Airport saw over 50% increase in passenger traffic. 738,000 people flew through Key West in 2020. That's a record. I can tell you I live in sight of the airport. Most people do. It's only a 2 by 4 mile island, right, Scott? So pretty much anywhere is close to the airport. But in addition to the passenger commercial flights, I can tell you from personal observations, the amount of private jet traffic that went in and out of Key West in the last couple of years dramatically increased. Another way to measure changes in tourism during COVID is hotel occupancy. We saw nearly 100% occupancy at many times during the years during COVID, with prices that were some of the highest in the country on average for hotels. So lots of people coming, generating lots of occupancy tax revenue. In 2019, the year prior to COVID, which was a record year for occupancy tax in the Florida Keys in Monroe County, $51.7 million was, excuse me, $51.5 million was generated. That was a record year. I'm looking at my notes. Yep, 69.7 in 2020. It went from 51.5 to $69.7 million in occupancy tax. The highest monthly income in occupancy tax for hotels prior to COVID was $7 million. That was in March of 2019. This past February, in 1 month, $10 million. So we are seeing huge increases in the number of tourists. That is simultaneous with challenges on our natural resources. Now, let me be clear, I am not saying that the declines in our resources are from tourism, but increases in tourism are happening while our resources, especially our reefs, are struggling. Now, reefs around the world have struggled for decades. People know that. That's not unique to Florida. That's lots of places where there are corals have been declining. Some of the reasons are on the slide here. Temperature stress, storm events. Specifically, I want to talk about the picture on the far right of this slide. That's a picture of a coral with a disease, stony coral tissue loss disease. Some of you have probably heard about this because it has been going on here in Florida for a number of years. It is unprecedented and it is devastating to our reefs. We have lost in the Keys millions, and I mean that quite literally, millions of corals due to stony coral tissue loss disease. And that was something that was not lost on certain parts of the tourism industry. Fedor's, the publication, put the Florida Keys on their list for no-go places in 2020. This was published in November of 2019. This was a list of 13 destinations around the world. This wasn't just US, this is international destinations, and they said don't go to the Florida Keys because of stony coral tissue loss disease. The corals need a break. So let me remind you what I just said about tourism increases in the last 2 years. So clearly people weren't reading this publication, but that is because I think there were limited, unusual situations right after this came out, right? Opportunities for travel were really restricted internationally. There were cruise ships were tied up in port. People were coming to the Florida Keys because it was an easy place to get to, relatively speaking. Okay, so quickly I'm gonna just pivot to a few examples of how the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary is trying to work in the context of resource declines and resource threats with our partners in tourism, including Scott and his company, Fury. We have a lot of work that we are doing, and we have a lot of programs separate from the tourism industry, but for the purposes of this discussion, I'm gonna limit my examples to things that relate to tourism. Scott mentioned that he has been supporting work that a number of us are trying to do in restoration. And so lucky for us, there are ways to help these corals turn things around. And we're engaging tourists and partners like other businesses, Fury and others, to help us in restoration. So I can talk more about this when we get to the discussion. We also have programs in partnership with businesses in the community. We call it our Blue Star program. This is a voluntary program. So businesses like Scott's can choose to be a part of this. And by committing to being a Blue Star operator, either as a diving and snorkeling tour operator or a fishing guide, by committing to being a part of this, they're committing to raising the sustainability efforts of their business and helping their clients, their guests, enjoy these resources, but do so in a way that is sustainable. We also started a program we call Gold Clean Seas Florida Keys. This is a program with dive and snorkel operators that we provide funding along with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. And the funds go to dive and snorkel operators to go out and do cleanups. And so their passengers, instead of going out to look at the corals, see the pretty fishes, they go out to help make the system better, cleaner. And the last quick example I will mention is our mooring buoy program. As I noted, we have millions of people that come boating, diving, snorkeling, fishing in the Keys. Imagine if the last several decades, every one of them was dropping an anchor on our sensitive seafloor. That would not be good. So we have installed a system of over 500 moorings within the Florida Keys so that when you go to these spots, instead of having to drop your anchor, you can enjoy that reef, you can fish, snorkel, dive, whatever, just have a sandwich, but you can do so without dropping an anchor on the reef. So that is another program that we have to try to make sure that people can enjoy these resources, but we can try to help protect them along the way. And so that is the quick context I wanted to offer before I hope we have a robust and interesting discussion about sustainable tourism, resilient ecotourism. Thank you. Oops, good one.
Thank you so much for your introductions. So now if you would be so kind to join me here on the stage for our question and answer session. So I do have a list of questions, but I would first like to open the floor to the audience in case anybody has a question or a comment for our panelists. Yes, sir.
Howdy. So one of the things that I can see, especially among people of my age, is this real fascination with the aesthetics of, again, sustainability of the environment in general. And so how do you balance sort of the desire for tourists to come down here to enjoy the natural spaces of Florida and the surrounding areas, the kind of the real and dedicated impact that presents, as opposed to, again, that environmental aesthetic, the things that you could call greenwashing, sort of the things that appeal to those people, that give them that good, fuzzy feeling of I'm helping to protect the environment. How do we balance what their real impact is, as opposed to kind of what we're telling them that we're doing for the environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question. And, there's a question that always runs through my head, which is, how high is up? I mean, how many tourists do we want? Orlando always brags, every time they hit a new milestone, they hit 75 million tourists. And I just wonder, well, how many more tourists can you possibly squeeze into a destination? And then when you're trying to protect your natural resources, how do you do that in a sustainable way, but keep your hoteliers happy, keep your businesses happy, keep people employed, and do all of that at the same time? It's a challenge. And I think that's why we need the science side of it, because some of that information can feed us in the tourism business. Our natural desire as marketers is obviously to try to do more and create more revenue, but there has to be a point where that's balanced with the sustainability of your destination. And I think actually I wanted to mention real quickly what Hawaii's doing. Hawaii took the time period with COVID as their shutdown period to really look at the islands and look at what was happening in their parks and in some of their natural areas. And they've actually got a program now, and they began educating their hoteliers and the resorts there. But what they're trying to do is have a cap on the number of people that go to different parks in any given week. And so they're issuing basically passes, and they're trying to control the flow of tourists. And in a way that will keep it sustainable and allow them to be there for future generations. I think it's really interesting. Obviously, they're islands, so they have a little bit more control than maybe we do in the mainland. But I think what they're trying to do is really noble, and it is worth investigating to see if that's having some positive impact.
I can touch on this. I look at what we do in Key West on our vessels, and we carry 300 to 400,000 people a year. Those folks they have the option of getting on one of my vessels or bringing one of their own to Key West. So, I look at, we do take people out to the coral reef and to the backcountry, and we do things in and on the water. So one of my boats can take 50 people with a single engine, compared to that same 50 people perhaps renting 10 vessels with 10 different engines. Another piece about that is that on our vessel, we know where to go, how to get there safely, and can educate them, while they're on the vessel. We do that. We have snorkel school, we have coral reef school, we have handouts, and all the things that we use in our boat are biodegradable, okay? And we look to sail instead of run engines, okay? So, I think it starts within the company too. You have to have a company that understands, that has a purpose, an understanding the resource and the things that we need to do to protect it. And so we're Blue Star operators as well. So, I think it starts with the company DNA, but recognizing that, what is that environment we work within? How can we minimize our impact? People do want to get in and on the water in Key West. That's going to be the case, whether they do it on a rental vessel, their own vessels, they do it with me. They're going to want to be on the water. So it's my hope that they tour with me, not for the money, because I think I'm going to be able to do that in a much safer, cleaner way than if they tried it on their own.
Seems like there's two parts to your question. One is the sustainability aspect in terms of profitability. In the case of Disney, who is using all 12 of the Blue Community strategies, they're actually saving $35 million in operating expenses a year just here in Florida, and more company-wide. So sustainability doesn't have to be at the expense of economic profitability. But in terms of restriction, that's been going on in tourism in different parts of the country and the world for years. Years ago, I, for example, hiked the Grand Canyon. We had to get our permit a year in advance. They only let so many people go. And when I used to work as a backpacking guide, they started with 16-person limit, then they put it down to 12, and then down to 10. Now it's down to some places 4 or 6. So, there's management already happening that way. But the real smart tourism planners find ways to redirect the large numbers of people to spots in like a park where the other areas, are left alone. And so that comes into planning. And you can take more people if you do your planning properly.
I was just trying to quickly do the math because my job is as a resource manager, right? And we have 40 people who work for the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and as you heard me say, 5 million visitors. So I was trying to do the math of how many people, my one staff per how many, what is that? Anyway, it's a lot. It's more people than we can reach. And so for us, it is essential to work with people like this guy, because as he said, his staff touches, and it's just one company, big one company in Key West, and you touch 300,000 people a year at least? At least. And I can attest that when they're on his boats and experiencing your tours and interacting with his crew, they are passionate about it. And so I feel it's really, really important as a resource manager to work with businesses, because they are our conduit to the users, to the people who are enjoying this place. And we depend upon them to help us get the messages out so that people, when they come and enjoy these resources, they can do so responsibly.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from the audience? Questions over here.
With all the people coming here, what do you think are one or two of the biggest hurdles or challenges with being a sustainable tourist state? Is it infrastructure or is it, oh, sorry.
You start at the beginning, I can hear you.
With all the people coming here, what do you think are one or two of the largest hurdles to having sustainable tourism? Is it infrastructure, education? What do you think are the biggest hurdles that we need to overcome to make it a sustainable practice?
I'll jump in and say I think it's education. I think a lot of people don't know. They don't know how to, and you know, I always say Iowa because that's where my family is from. Don't mean to pick on Iowa. But people from Iowa don't know about how to interact with a reef. How would they know? And so I think that's a huge hurdle, is that people just don't know how to enjoy these resources responsibly.
Yeah, I would concur. I think education's number one. And you know, you said something I thought was really interesting, which is working with the providers, you know, the people that are actually face-to-face with tourists every day. As a tourism office, you know, I don't really see a lot of tourists other than driving up and down A1A, you know, but I don't interact with them because they're not coming to my place of business, they're coming to all of the tourist locations. So working with those owners and trying to train them and have a program where they can communicate, you know, all the hoteliers, you know, handing out cards when people check in on, you know, what they should and shouldn't do, or having beach cleanup programs that they could, you know, go to the front desk and get a little kit where they can go out and they've got trash bags and gloves and things that they can use to pick up microplastics and things like that. I mean, those are the types of programs that I think will be very successful.
Hi, my question is beyond the tourism part. That's nice that we're picking up plastic bags and things like that. But when that tourist got on a plane in Wisconsin and flew here, how many bazillion tons of carbon were put into the atmosphere? Do you have any intention or ideas about offsetting carbon or carbon credits? Because that's what's going to destroy your tourism ultimately when the ocean rises, because the carbon levels are going up. So we're promoting businesses in Florida that say, come on down, spew some carbon in the atmosphere on your way, and eventually destroy our resources. Does that make sense? So what's your alternative to destroying the resource? Ultimately, your goal is getting tourists that ultimately will wipe out your business. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's what you're doing. Seriously, okay?
So we're trying to solve for world peace, and that's a big ask, I know.
You don't realize that she just said you had 1 million more tourists or something. All those people flew here from somewhere. They didn't drive from Wisconsin. You know what I'm saying? I don't even want to drive from Orlando anymore. So the idea is they got on a plane. That's one of the biggest emitters of carbon pollution in the atmosphere. And are we offsetting that carbon, which in turn will cause our oceans to rise, which in turn will submerge the Keys, which in turn destroys your business. Long-term looking at, and same thing with Brevard County, you know, messing up the beach. I'm just curious, is there a carbon tax initiative or anything like that in your minds, or?
Not in my minds, and you know, I mean, what do we do as a company? We are definitely looking to move more toward electronics. More sailing. You know, we want to have a zero footprint. We don't have a zero footprint today because we do in fact use engines. And do I promote people? Do I promote tourism to come to Key West? Yes, I do. I do. But I also realize that not everyone's going to stay home, right? People are going to travel, and if they didn't, we'd have a bigger problem on our hands. We wouldn't have an economy. We wouldn't have employment, so on and so forth. So, you know, should we be conscious of what you're saying? Of course we should. And we as a company want to do everything we can to have a zero footprint. I can't tell people not to get on an airplane. I think they're going to do that, okay? As a company, I can tell you that we address that issue in a big way. But, I also know that if everyone just stayed home and didn't get on a plane.
We did that for a whole year. It was wonderful.
But did it really? Was it really okay? I mean, I'm looking at the economy today, and I'll tell you, you're wrong on that.
For the environment, the statistics on the air quality, the pollutants, all that stuff went down significantly.
It did.
Nobody traveled.
Right.
So I'm just saying that.
But it took a pandemic. It took a pandemic for that to happen.
Exactly. Isn't that sad that that's what had to happen?
You know,
to clean up the atmosphere. I'm just saying, I'm listening to your, and I understand, I grew up in Florida. I remember when Disney World did not exist, okay?
Right.
We were mostly an agricultural economy, I guess, okay? But the point is, Disney came and all the other tourism things kicked in. So that's our primary focus in Central Florida for everybody now, is tourism. And Brevard County, I've been to the Brevard Zoo multiple times. It's not just people from out of town, it's locals type to use these things as well. But it just dawned on me that while we're promoting tourism, we're also promoting travel, which in turn promotes carbon emissions, which in turn causes a problem for us later. So I don't know if there's a way to work around that, or if there's a concept, or maybe we should change a model somehow. How do you get here without?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a way to address some of those things without shutting down the global economy. I don't think that's the answer, is to stop travel. I think the answer, ma'am, may I speak, please?
I didn't say that was the answer.
Okay. If you let me talk, I'll give you a thought, and then we can go on. There are a lot of companies now working on low emission aircraft. And I think technology is an answer for us. Science is an answer for us, because they're replacing a lot of the old aircraft now with new lower emission, higher flying aircraft. And I think that's the plan going forward, is to move into a world where, as we design vehicles, the vehicle that you talked about, unbelievable. Bringing that to Orlando, that's fantastic. I mean, that kind of technology, Elon Musk, who, by the way, is a huge investor in Brevard County, but with Tesla and what they're doing with electric vehicles, there's now something called an e-aircraft. It basically is a giant drone, and it's used fan engines and electricity to power it. Completely low emission, low carbon. So, I mean, I think the world is going to have to change. I agree with you, but there's a way to do it. There's a way to transition it so we can all still put food on the table, but at the same time, get to a better place.
I think it's important to put the carbon thing in perspective. I mean, not that airplanes are not an issue. They certainly are an issue. But buildings are 40% of our carbon emissions, and agriculture is a third. So, we got a lot more to gain on more efficient buildings and more sustainable agriculture than we have with the airplanes. But having said that, there are models. So, for example, Paradise Villas in Granada, they actually ask you when you arrive at the hotel, where did you come from? And they give a carbon credit based on your flight. And then when you get there, they say, keep track of where you travel, but please try to use a travel means that is less carbon intensive, because we're going to pay for that too. So they partner with their guests, and the guests then get educated, and they start walking more, or riding bikes, or carpooling, or doing other things like this in order to reduce carbon. And so and then of course, high-speed trains will bring a huge difference, when we start catching up with the rest of the world, the United States, on that track. The Aptura, there's 78 million visitors in Orlando alone, and thinking how many of them come to amusement parks, and conventions and meetings where they use the car very little, but renting a car adds up with 78 million people. And if you have a solar vehicle that has no emissions, you reduce a lot that way too. So there's a lot of strategies, and there's really a lot being thought about this in the travel part of the COP process at the UN, if you want to look into it in more detail. But what I'm saying is the way we have our buildings either efficient or non-efficient, and the way we do our agriculture is going to make more difference than the airplanes.
So a couple of quick comments. You raise interesting points, and what's curious to me is in Monroe County, Key West Airport is it. We're in Key West, but nonetheless. And the airport director always talks about how it's great that people are flying in because they're not on the road. In US 1, the one road going in and out of the Keys is very, very crowded anymore. And so it's actually considered a great thing locally that people are flying in. And I'm not making that case, I'm just saying that it is held up as, this is great because these people aren't on the road. The second thing I want to say is I mentioned the increase in occupancy taxes and revenue being brought in by tourism. And as you mentioned, locals would be paying a lot more in taxes if it were not for tourism industry. But then the other thing is the Tourism Development Council that receives a lot of those funds historically, and Scott, you correct me if I'm wrong because you're a fourth generation conch, but historically has used a lot of those revenues for things like fixing exhibits or increasing the tourist experience. They are starting to use more of those funds for sustainability projects. So not fixing sidewalks where the tourists like to walk as much as fixing the reef. They are spending some of that money to help restore. Now, again, I'm not saying that that's an excuse or that solves the airplane issues and carbon issues or whatever, but we're seeing that those kinds of changes happening with how we're using that money. So.
We're definitely changing. That's the change. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. We're recognizing that, and those dollars are being, changed, taken in another direction, and that's new. Yeah.
Hi, Tamara Worthy. I'm just interested, you had mentioned the Blue Star businesses. Do you find that most businesses are interested in trying to achieve that, or are they not educated in what it could actually do and provide?
No, unfortunately, it is, I would say, the minority of the operators participate in the Blue Star program. I can't tell you why. I suspect it's because it takes a lot of commitment. And however, I think the people that do participate do so because they know that there's a clientele out there that wants that. When they go to experience a place, they want to make sure that their footprint is as light as it can be. Yeah.
Scott, do you see that the people that come in your vessels?
There's no question, and the second piece of that is it fits our culture. So it's two-part for us. One being, I think, the discerning customer looks for that Blue Star operator, someone who's, committed to those guidelines. And then the second piece is the culture at Fury, which I touched on a little bit in my rambling, was that, that is the culture at Fury. We're passionate about our resource, and Blue Star commitment is exactly that we're going to do these things. And that just fits the DNA of Fury in our cabins. They wouldn't have it any other way. I think we were Blue Star before Blue Star, in that we internally had committed to doing things in accord with that direction. So for us to become a Blue Star operator was just very easy. It was what we wanted to do.
Is there an encouragement and promotion to get more?
On our website, you'll see, we're a Blue Star operator. We promote that. But you're saying, maybe I didn't answer your question. What?
Well, just to get more involved in
More businesses as a part of the program. Absolutely, we welcome and encourage and try to promote it. But again, I think for some, it's just too heavy of a lift. They don't have the same sort of ethics, if you will, that Fury does or some of the other operators.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Why is that not more generally practiced? Is there expensive to set up? Do people are they just reluctant to change? Is there too much space involved? What seem to be the obstacles to that becoming the general practice?
I think there's multiple factors, and it's only been in recent years the Department of Agriculture has really targeted ways to finance and fund a lot of these transitions, because there is a significant upfront cost, for example, putting all the solar panels, on your buildings, and to put in a biodigester, and to develop, your marketing, so you have the restaurant partnerships. And so, actually, there's a presentation this week. The Secretary of Agriculture said they're going to put in hundreds of millions of dollars to do just what you're saying, but a lot of that's been the financing part. And some of it, people just haven't thought of it and really don't know. It's kind of like, why do we have 2 million condos and 7 million apartments in Florida that are not using solar energy? It's like kind of a no-brainer when you think about the benefits, but we're not doing it.
Okay, well, if you would join me in thanking the panelists. And I believe we have our drinks, right, coming up.
Oh, you're standing between us and drinks. Watch out. That will officially conclude the panels. I would like to give Dr. Christy Lewis a chance to recap for us what she has heard today, and potentially give us some path forward, recognizing that we can continue these conversations for the next 2 hours during our cocktail hour. So everything that was left on the table can be resurrected and discussed over cocktails. Christy?
Okay. We can wing it then.
I assume you know Finbar and Julie? Yeah.
Of course. Finbar's like.
Help them run the Pirate Festival.
You guys want to come down? You guys want to step down? You don't have to be on the hot seat anymore. That was a really hot seat. All right, hi everyone. Christy Lewis, as you know by now. I'm core faculty here and a member of UCF Coastal. I'm an applied marine ecologist. You haven't heard much from me today. Aiming to understand how natural and human-caused disturbances impact marine ecosystems, fisheries in particular, and how humans interact with these changes. But as Sergio said, I'm not here to talk about my research. I'm here, and I definitely don't want to stand in the way of what's going on out there. We highly encourage you to attend. And as you might know, we have a special cocktail for you called the UCF Coastal Sea Breeze. So in addition to the beer and wine that is out there, make sure you check out the UCF Coastal Sea Breeze. So I'd like to thank the sponsors one final time: UCF Office of the Provost, UCF Office of Research, Dixie Crossroads Seafood Restaurant, and the Montilla Law Firm. We'd also like to thank members of the UCF Coastal Board who made it today and weren't able to attend. So those include Dykes Everett, Roger Chapin, Paul Ferber, George McKay, Scott Saunders, Nan Summers, and Laura Lee Thompson. And I'd also like to thank, yes, let's thank those. Also like to thank the UCF Arboretum again for providing our lovely flower arrangements. And again, the College of Sciences marketing team who really drove this participation in this event. It's been exciting to hear the exchange of ideas that were shared today. And I know personally, I've already made connections that I know will become fruitful partnerships. I hope you all found it just as inspiring. I think the best way to sum it all up is with the conversations is to visualize it, and we're able to put it up there. So you should see a word cloud up there. So this word cloud kind of represents the 10 pages of notes that I took while we were all discussing today. And I think it really kind of shows what stands out. So community, resilience, and climate change, which captures not only the challenges, but our opportunities ahead of us, which is the entire topic of this event. So we spent some time identifying challenges that face Florida, and these issues are synergistic and multiplicative in nature. Whether you live in Brevard, Manatee, Key West, Orange, or Osceola County, we are all influenced by the coast and the changes that are occurring there in some way.
Climate change, sea level rise, habitat loss, overfishing, increased storminess, just to name a few we talked about today, and there's many more. But we also spent some time speaking of the successes in coastal Florida, such as the IRL restoration projects that Jen Locke mentioned, and the DEP the statewide funding for the vulnerability assessments. And these assessments are the first steps in creating resilient and sustainable communities. But one statement that resonated with me that might not have resonated with anyone else highlights the importance of what UCF Coastal is trying to do as a multidisciplinary center. Recall Peter Kranis from the second panel saying, "I'm the least sciencey guy here," right? This notion is exactly how UCF Coastal is aiming to solve wicked coastal problems, collaborating across discipline and difference to innovate for solutions. We contend that complex problems, like we are facing in Florida, necessitate complex solutions, which must include diverse perspectives. This also includes ensuring that we co-produce knowledge with the communities in which we work and serve. Which brings me to the final point, opportunities for the future. Some of the other themes that ran through our discussions today were things like participation, partnership, collaboration, and communities. At UCF Coastal, we are championing action science, which is where we aim to work directly with the communities that are most vulnerable to this change. But championing this work and actually carrying it out are two different things, and I can promise you, we have all talked about this at length. So given what we've learned today, it seems like the next phase of research and collaboration will need to be more focused on what we call action science and the co-production of knowledge, which Randy pointed out as an example of getting the community leaders together. This approach allows us to work directly with the communities who are often rarely get a seat at the table. We can work directly with them to identify the problems, not come to them with the problems. They know the problems because they're living there. And we will work with them and then co-develop research-based solutions that worked for them, not what we think should work. So in addition to thanking you for coming here today, I want to leave you with a few questions to inspire you to take action, to think outside the box about how we want to encourage and develop a culture of resilience in coastal Florida. So here are those three questions. How can we leverage lived experience from communities and citizens as a knowledge base for promoting resilience in coastal Florida? How do we interrupt our own biases, intellectual, culture, and personal, in order to better co-produce knowledge with communities most impacted by coastal change? And finally, what roles do cultural and intellectual humility play in creating creative, effective, and sustainable interventions in the coastal region? So thanks y'all for coming today, and now go get a coastal breeze. Thank you.